Medical Board to order. Roll call will be
Dr. Waterhouse,
present.
Dr. Sullivan,
Here.
Ms. Bowler, Ms. Bullard,
Oh, I'm sorry. I
Sorry.
wasn't even with Kathy. Yes, here. Sorry.
Ms. Laredo, absent, Ms. Mancuso,
Here.
Dr. Nolan,
Here.
Dr. Nunez.
She said Miss Bowler, that's why you didn't
Sorry.
recognize
My bad. We'll have it again.
I'm here.
And Ms. Yanes is participating via teleconference. Ms. Yanes,
Present.
can you confirm your teleconference location for the record, please?
Yeah, I'm at 2940 East First Street, Los Angeles, California, 90023.
Thank you.
So we have established a quorum. Introductions, agenda item number 2. It's my great pleasure to introduce Jessica Sieferman. She is our new executive officer. I think she's met most of the people here in this room. There's nobody happier than me to have a new executive officer. She has been with DCA, the Department of Consumer Affairs, for 10 years. Most recently, she was the EO of the Optometry Board, where she's been for 8 years. So she brings a lot of experience. She even managed to bring the optometrists and the opticians together into one board, and they hate each other.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. She got that worked out. Anyway, I hope you all get to know Jessica better, and we look forward to our working together in the next few years. So,
Thank
would
you.
you like to say a few words?
I am thrilled to be here. I cannot say enough good things about the staff so far, and the board members in general. It's been an amazing opportunity so far, and I'm just super excited to be here, so thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, so moving on to agenda item number 3, the review and approval of the May board meeting minutes. I have to say that I love how these are organized now.
I was going to comment on the very beautiful letterhead.
Yes. Isn't it nice? Myself, I just had one question on page 13 at the beginning, at the top of that page, under review of the Board Administrative Procedures Manual. I had thought that one of the items we were going to look at was the number of members, or the past percentage when 6 members were present, what it took to get a positive vote when only 6 members were present. Was that talked about?
No,
To put on the future agenda?
it's in our manual. It'll be addressed today in our administrative manual.
I know it is, but didn't we talk about it last time?
I believe it was
Maybe-
brought up at the October meeting.
Okay, maybe it was then. Okay.
I do have
Okay,
an issue with page 11. I was present, but my name is deleted from the members present list, but I was here.
good to know.
Well, I might not have added much, but I was here.
Minor detail on page 4, the vote on legislation of interest. I think a vote of someone abstaining, it should be 701. Isn't that the proper way of writing it?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, 701.
I had a change to this, Alana. On page 2, it said I was absent. I'm not sure if that meant I was absent at the February meeting or if I was absent at this meeting, but I was actually at this meeting.
So I believe that's referring to the February.
Oh, it was referring to February? Okay.
That's the way I took it.
That's why you abstained.
Okay, so on item 3, on page 2,
Number 3.
the vote should be Alana Yanez abstained, because it's a vote on the minutes, right?
So there was a question about the minutes, and we reviewed them on the second day, and Alana wasn't here the second day, so that's why she was absent for the
Got it.
Great, thank you.
I just have, although the minutes are well organized and colorful, I did find them a little bit brief. I had to kind of go back and remind myself about some other things, like the San Bernardino pilot project was about emergency medical transport of police dogs. That was the one that would allow them to go into emergency vehicles. I kind of had to add that.
It still was 14 pages.
Yeah. It just was a little bit more brief than the past. And I say that affectionately. The item D, this was the one that was going to wipe away, you couldn't use convictions to deny applications, and after a certain amount of time, it was limiting probationary terms. I had to go back and remind myself about that. And G was about shelter vehicles, not ambulances, but like shelter vehicles need proper ventilation.
Right.
And all that.
Right.
So it was, I had to go back and review my own notes a little bit more than previously.
So I'd like to address why they're more brief than in the past. Again, that's on me. Because minutes, I think, are tough. Especially if they're transcription type minutes. It takes a long time to do for staff. And what we did is we made it to where there's hyperlinks. The blue, they're hyperlinks to the actual parts of the webcast to where they're discussed, and we're using that as part of the record.
Oh.
And so the idea would be that you have a brief introduction of the topic, but then if you ever had a question of what was discussed in depth, you can go right to that webcast, and it'll start at the time that was discussed.
Oh.
And so at optometry, we actually reverted to just pure action minutes, to where the whole, the minutes had, the start of it was a hyperlink to the discussion, and then we did a hyperlink to when the motion was made, and then the actions the votes that were taken, and that was all in the minutes. And we did that for a couple of reasons. Mainly, it took a lot of staff time to do, as I had said. I think that when talking to Amanda, it could take up to a week to do that, and I would rather her focus her time on the pending regulations that we have. As you know, we have quite a bit to do. And I think if the goal was to accurately capture what happened in the minutes by providing the webcast and the link to that discussion is the most accurate way to do it. It also makes it to where we're not having to pick and choose what's important, because then it becomes filtered by what Amanda deems is important, and one member could say, well, I didn't say that, or I didn't say it that way, or I said this and it's not included. And so it can get kind of dicey in the minutes. So I think that's a better option, is to provide the action minutes and then do links to the actual discussions and webcast.
Had I known these were hyperlinks, that would have made that easier.
Yeah.
Dr. Sullivan?
Yeah, and I would also suggest that we leave our microphones on all of the time, because when you listen to those hearings and you need to catch up on some issues, a fair percentage of time the microphone is off and you miss some real important stuff. So if you need to make a snide remark to your neighbor, turn it off then, but have it on the rest of the time.
He is such a jerk. Oh.
Okay, any other corrections?
I think Grant-
Any comments from the public?
Grant Miller, CVMA, good morning. This is in response to Ms. Seiferman's explanation for the minutes, and it'll probably be taken up in agenda item number 8. I would like to point out that there is a proposal in agenda item number 8 to allow the erase or destruction of open and public meeting audio and video 30 days after the recording. And so if that's going to, if we're going to pare down the minutes, and rely on the recordings, then it would be, in my opinion, the best interest of the public to make sure that the,
Absolutely.
videos are not destroyed 30 days after. Thank you.
And we post them on our website too, so I wouldn't recommend destroying them, just keep them on our website.
No, they should never be destroyed, no. When we're going to speak to that item, I was going to be very much against that.
How long do they stay on?
They can stay on as long as we want them to be put on there.
5 years? How long is it?
Or longer.
Forever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Forever.
Right now, it's 2 years.
Are we talking about audio and video recordings?
So,
Or just the minutes?
so it's really, I guess, if there's an audio recording, are we doing on an audio?
Well, we're going to get to it. It's in the agenda, so I don't think we should jump
Yeah.
to it now.
Yeah.
But I'm not the president, so,
Okay.
sorry.
Any other corrections to the minutes?
I better turn off that microphone.
Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
As amended.
As
Second,
amended. Okay, there's a motion, a second. Call for the vote?
Dr. Waterhouse?
Yes.
Dr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Ms. Bowler?
Yes.
Ms. Laredo? Ms. Mancusa?
yes.
Dr. Nolan?
Yes.
Dr. Nunez?
Yes.
Ms. Yanis?
Yes.
Right, motion carries.
Motion carries. Thank you. Agenda item number 4.
It's Patrick.
Okay, okay. So, report and update from Department of Consumer Affairs, and I think Patrick?
Number 4. We don't have a 4.
Good morning. President Waterhouse, Vice President Sullivan, Executive Officer Sieferman, and members of the board. Good morning. It is good to see you all again in beautiful Sacramento, and thank you so much for allowing the department to provide an update to your board. I also want to say, Executive Officer Sieferman, welcome to your new role on the board. We're incredibly excited to have this continued opportunity to collaborate with you, and really excited to still have you on the DCA family. I also have with me from agency, Ms. Sonia Logman, who I believe want to share a few words as well.
Yes. Sorry, do you mind? There we go. This is very short. Good morning, everyone. I hope council will allow for the quick privilege. Sonia Logman, Deputy Secretary at Business, Consumer Services, and Housing Agency, so an extension, I would say, of Department of Consumer Affairs. We oversee 11 different state departments, just over 5,500 employees, and just about $2.3 billion in revenue that is mostly generated, like folks like you, through licensing fees. I'm here today on behalf of Secretary Alexis Podesta and our entire family at BCSH to say congratulations to Miss Jessica. We continue to be very supportive of Director Garfilo's initiative to really identify some amazing talent within Department of Consumer Affairs and to help grow them and, of course, encourage them to take on bigger opportunities. And so we're very excited to see Jessica assume this role and congratulate you, obviously, in making what we think is a good selection. In addition, I just wanted to say quickly, thank you so much as well for your collaboration with the California Horse Racing Board. It is your sister department under our agency, so we appreciate all that you have done to contribute to a stronger licensing framework in that space as well. So again, welcome to Sacramento, and thanks to Patrick for letting me commandeer his agenda item. I've got to get back to agency, so I figured this would be the best place to do it. Congratulations, Jessica.
Thank you.
Great. So I will continue with an update from the Department of Consumer Affairs. Actually, a very short update for you today, starting with the Director's Leadership Call. On June 25th, Director Garfilo hosted a teleconference call with board presidents and vice presidents. Thank you, President Waterhouse, for attending. With over 30 participants on the call, the department provided a few updates on key topics, including Assembly Bill 2138, which I believe is going to be on the agenda later today, an update on the Executive Officer's salary study, as well as discussing various improvements that the department has been making to improve our regulatory review process. With the success of this initial call, we plan to host another one, so please stay tuned for the next date. My next update is regarding the licensing and enforcement work group. As you recall from prior updates, the department kicked off in April a licensing and enforcement work group meetings where we convened executive officers and key licensing and enforcement staff where we tried to identify best business practices that can be shared across all DCA boards to really improve licensing and enforcement activities. The work group meetings have been meeting every month to see where we could innovate in the areas of licensing and enforcement. And I'll share with you two examples. Back in June, the licensing work group heard from Dr. Joseph Morris at the Board of Registered Nursing, where he discussed BRN's Cloud Drive technology, which allows graduating nursing students to upload their transcript electronically right after graduation. This month, the licensing work group also discussed a tool for streamlining letter generation and automating letter generation to licensees. So to that end, we want to thank Executive Officer Sieferman for joining us in this licensing work group and being willing to share your institutional knowledge and wisdom across all DCA boards. My next update is regarding the Substance Abuse Coordination Committee. Back in April, the department reconvened the Substance Abuse Coordination Committee. As you recall, per Senate Bill 796, the department has been tasked with examining the standards related to drug testing for licensees who are in a diversion program or are in probation. The committee has been tasked to re-examine the standards based on recent development in testing and research, testing research and testing technology. And we've also been tasked to report back to the legislature by January 1st of 2019. Per statute, as you recall, the committee is made up of the Healing Arts Board's executive officer, a representative from the Department of Healthcare Services, and is chaired by the director of the Department of Consumer Affairs. At its last meeting in June, the committee examined those testing standards, took an in-depth look at drug testing methodologies, research, and technological advancements. The committee also heard from a panel of industry and medical experts in the field of rehabilitation, toxicology, and laboratory science. At this meeting, the committee voted to adopt some minor changes to Uniform Standard Number 4 related to drug testing, and that change allows boards to have more flexibility when testing licensees who are on probation, who are out of state or out of the country. At this meeting, the committee also decided to further examine the issue of testing frequency, and so the department is in the process of scheduling this meeting to have this conversation.
Has there been an issue with testing technology? Oh, you didn't.
In terms of
why are you
issue,
studying this?
It really depends board by board. Part of the issue is, some boards require the licensee who is on probation to carry the cost of the testing. So sometimes those costs can be prohibitive. And I think part of what the committee is trying is to find a good balance between having testing that ensures consumer protection, but also encourages participants to go through a diversion program.
So it's more like frequency, not really testing technology.
Right,
Okay.
and there's also a conversation around the piece of randomnicity, where some academic research says that the randomness of the test may factor more importantly than the frequency.
Okay.
Could I just, or do you want to, should we do questions after?
Yeah, well,
Let's do it.
I've actually, one more last update, which is regarding board member orientation training. The department has additional dates for BMOT, board member orientation training for 2018. As you know, this is a one-day training in Sacramento that details the important responsibilities of board members. BMOT is required within 1 year of appointment and reappointment to a board. So the next dates are going to be September 18th and the next one December 5th. With additional dates to be announced soon. And so feel free to contact us or work with Executive Officer Sieferman if you need to take your BMOT training. So that concludes my update, and I'm happy to take any questions from the board.
Kathy?
Oh, I was on the drug testing, which sounds very interesting, looking at all the new protocols, et cetera, et cetera. You said something about one of the things they had determined early on at the meeting as giving boards some more flexibility in some drug. Is that in effect now, or would it be in effect, when would it be in effect? And do we have direction, do the boards have direction about what the flexibility is?
The work of the committee is not done yet.
Yeah.
And there's still other topics that need to be explored. As I mentioned, the committee wanted to take a more in-depth look at testing frequency. I think the roadmap is we want to make sure we discuss all the changes that need to be made before we finalize it into the final changes to the uniform standards.
Perfect, so that was just kind of a consensus, but okay. And then I had another question, you might have addressed it at the beginning. The salary analysis, when is that due to be completed? Or did I miss that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So you asking about the executive officer salary
yes,
study? Yes.
Study.
Pleased to announce that the department has awarded a contract with a firm, and we'll be meeting with the consultants very soon. From start to finish, we think the salary study is about to take 6 months. So probably results will be early 2019. And just to give you some additional background of the salary study, it will assess the programmatic changes that have occurred in the past years and how these changes have increased or changed the complexity of running a board. So the consultant will be expected to really assess where those complexities have changed and if it warrants salary changes for executive officers.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any questions from the public? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I was neglectful, I didn't finish through with all of agenda item number 2. I was so excited introducing Jessica, I didn't offer for the members of the public to introduce themselves.
Lynn Moon, California Registered Veterinary Technician Association.
Grant Miller, CVMA.
Valerie Fenstermaker, CDMA. Susan Tibbetts, Felicia Bay, Peaches Citizen.
Ken Pulowski, CVMA.
Cindy Sabley, WT, Sacramento Valley Veterinary Association.
Marilyn Jasper, Humane Society, Sierra Blue Hills, and Philly Babies Coalition.
Erica Hughes, California Animal Welfare Association.
That's everyone.
Diane Sokoloff, Supervising Deputy Attorney General, Liaison to the Veterinary Medical Board.
Thank you. Agenda item number 5, the MDC report. Dr. Sullivan is going to give that in place of Dr. Pollard.
Dr. Pollard did the report and emailed it to me, so we'll start agenda item 2. We welcomed the new members of the MDC. There were 4 of them. Dr. Kevin Lazarchef, Dr. Meg Warren, Ms. Leah Schelfeld, RVT, and Mr. Stuart Ekman. Christy Pulowski was elected vice chair. Agenda item 5, complaint process audit subcommittee. Dr. Pollard reported on his and Dr. Lazarchef's recent review of close disciplinary cases. A half dozen cases were reviewed, focusing on the expert witness reports. Examples of problematic language and writing by the expert witnesses were cited. A brief overview of the process was given for the new members. The importance of good medical records was emphasized. The continuation of the subcommittee's work was discussed. Comments from the committee and public were unanimous in their support of the task and their belief that it should continue. Particularly telling was the endorsement by Attorney Bonnie Lutz, who defends veterinarians in the Veterinary Medical Board actions. Dr. Lazarchef pointed out the irony of that, but the recognition that a better trained expert witness benefits all, including the defense attorney. Agenda item 6, shelter minimum standards. Efforts to define animal shelter facility were pursued along with a line-by-line discussion of minimum standards for shelters based on those in fixed facility. A detailed discussion of individual items was had involving shelter and public member input. The discussion was truncated due to time constraints with resolution to consult with legal staff and decide if the current approach is continued versus some modification of the process. Agenda item 7, minimum standards for dental radiography. The subject of intraoral dental radiographs and their place in veterinary dentistry as regards to standard of care was vigorously discussed. Committee members, Veterinary Medical Board Attorney Tara Welch, and numerous public members weighed in on the various issues centered around the dental rads and standard of care. The pros and cons included the pros and cons of introducing dental rads were much less requiring them as, well, I'm not sure. The pros were reveal pathology not otherwise recognized. The cons were cost, staff training, increased anesthesia and procedure time, potential for fewer pets presented for care. The current percentage of veterinary practices offering dental RADs estimated between 15 and 40%. A robust discussion of standard of care, minimum standards, and informed consent, hopefully advanced understanding of issues in veterinary dentistry specifically and the practice of veterinary medicine generally. No action item was advanced at this time. Action item 8 was pet ambulances. Dr. Poehler deferred to Executive Officer Jessica Seiferman, who along with the legal and veterinary medical board staff did a good job of summarizing the current status and statutes and regulations applicable to pet ambulances. Comparisons with practices in other states were made. Committee and public comments demonstrated the awareness of issues related to pet ambulances is sparse, so further research into this issue is necessary. As a start, frequently asked questions will be posted on the Veterinary Medical Board website.
Any questions, comments? Judy?
So does that mean this report is just what they talked about yesterday, but now they're going to assign those to subcommittees, delegate, and we're going to get a lot more information? Is that the next step?
Yes.
Okay.
Most of what was presented was research from the staff. Amanda and Jessica and Tara brought forth what we know thus far from in California, or the Highway Patrol, what their authority is in this area, and also information from other states. It was very broad, but it's only the beginning.
And which topic are we talking about here?
Well, actually, the two I'm most interested in, three, is shelter, dental, and ambulances are big concerns of mine, all three of them. And I'd really like to see those, fleshed out because there's so much to it. So
my
are
answer
they
was to the
subcommittees?
was the
Okay. And
I think that given 4 new members, Ethan doing the job of 2 people for months.
Oh, so wow.
Our new executive officer, I think we covered a lot of ground yesterday with such a large transition.
Right.
It will take our new members on the MDC a good 6 months to get up to date and going on it.
So maybe, do we need to pull any of those back from the MDC and take them on ourselves, or do we just wait for them to? Okay, go ahead.
I need to clarify the result on pet ambulance from yesterday. My understanding was that staff would just compile some research and perhaps Dr. Sullivan would report back on pet ambulances in his area, but there was no subcommittee for that one in particular. Actually, there was no subcommittee for RADs either, for the dental.
For which one?
The dental RADs.
Oh, there isn't?
No. I just want to be clear, because I thought your question was whether or not.
It is, yeah. I feel like substantial work needs to be done on each of those, and it's not just, hey, let's meet and talk about it. People need to be doing active research if they're going to take it on.
Okay, Dr. Nunez.
One of the reasons why I sent this issue to the MDC was.
Which issue?
The ambulance issue. Was because I believe that the practice of veterinary medicine is being done in these ambulances, and it's not being regulated as such. Some of these ambulances are delivering oxygen and administering controlled substances. I don't think that the MDC adequately addressed that. They just pretty much reported what we already know. Most of the progress on the board level is a result of complaints. So one issue that was brought up was to try to encourage any issues that veterinarians may be seeing or observing. And I wonder if we have social media. I wonder if we can perhaps put it on our social media pages to ask for, similar to how we did with non-anesthetic teeth cleaning. We're looking for complaints, and also maybe perhaps the CVMA could issue some sort of call for inquiry on if anyone's having any issues with pet ambulances.
Well, I think beyond that, is there anything that stops us from just writing regulations to cover pet ambulances.
So to clarify, I think there are statutes and regulations that address this issue, and that was discussed during the MDC meeting. What I would caution the board and the MDC from doing is kind of doing a more in-depth, essentially investigation into potential unlicensed practice, because that's not the role of the board members or of MDC, that's really the role of the staff. And so what I think would be more beneficial is if we develop more of the educational materials and help distribute that out on our website, our social media. The CHP was involved with that as well, to help disseminate that information, to let them know the statutes and regulations that are impacted. If the concern is the unlicensed practice, and there are specific members who have knowledge of these pet ambulances, I would encourage you to contact us directly so we can do investigations into that. I would not want the board members themselves researching potential enforcement issues, so you wouldn't be able to participate in the decision at closed session.
Dr. Sloman, did you have a question?
Yeah, specifically on the minimum standards of dental radiography, the decision was not to bring anything forward to the board.
Not to?
Right.
But the question that was investigated yesterday was, should dental x-rays be the standard of care for all dental patients?
And was there an answer?
The conclusion was not to bring anything forward to the board in relation to that.
So that's a
That's
no?
how I
So-
took it. I mean, that's,
I think the question is there another question to ask in place of that question?
Well, I mean, I've had direct problems as a consumer in both of these areas where, I told you Bootsy's story,
Right.
who had
Yes.
the stomatitis and the roots, and that, these x-rays they need to be mandatory in some cases, and they're not even an option. And so there's a problem here with that, number one. And then the ambulances, I mean, here I was ordering an ambulance now twice for my animals. The person shows up, I don't know, are they certified, not certified? What are they supposed to have? The minimum standards are very minimum. Are they qualified? Are they an RVT? Who's supposed to be doing things in these ambulances? What are their qualifications? What's their minimum criteria? There's so much.
Dr. Nunez?
We're going back between topics, and I'd like to focus on the ambulance
Yes.
issue.
Okay,
I support what Dr. Waterhouse mentioned about possibly, and I understand that we should not be focusing on looking for complaints. That is the job of the staff. But we certainly can focus on possibly introducing regulation about bringing these into our scope of what we can regulate. And before you answer that question, what does the CHP have to do with this? I don't get that connection.
So the CHP, they permit ambulances, and so when staff reached out to them to find out if they also permit pet ambulances, and they do not.
And then when you mention ambulances, we all know what an ambulance is. They have a siren and lights on top. But a lot of these pet ambulances, they just take a van and they paint a little picture on the side saying that they're a pet ambulance. And I don't know if the CHP is permitting that.
So CHP said that the pet ambulances are kind of akin to human ambulettes. They actually can't have the red sirens on the top. So they're not supposed to have that, so that would be good if.
I don't think any of these pet ambulances have sirens or lights. They just have
And they
little
shouldn't.
signage on the side. So the CHP really wouldn't know the scope of what's going on.
Right.
Kathy?
I'm on pet ambulances still. I think one of the things that I have watched much of the hearing, the MDC meeting yesterday, and it seems to me that one of the things that, just because of the turnover in officers and the board itself, it was a largely informational hearing. I think part of the thing that was a little different, and maybe we can request of them, is on the ambulances or on some of these other topics, there never was a conclusion like, okay, this is a complicated issue. Let's start a subcommittee go do due diligence, do the research, come back to the board with potential regulations and other reports. I don't know that that happened on some of these issues, and maybe we can request that the MDC do that. Anyway, so that's my thought.
Okay, Dr. Sullivan.
Well, I think what the discussion did bring up is that we do have regulations. So if they're transporting an animal and they're not providing any veterinary services, they don't need a premises permit. They're not, I don't believe, under our purview. If they have or provide any kind of services, then they are either operating from a veterinary clinic and their premises permit, or if they don't, then they have to have their own mobile premises permit. So the regulations are there. The premises permits are there.
In addition, the staff in the ambulance providing services would have to be registered.
Correct.
So if it's an RVT registration, if it's a veterinarian licensed, VACSP, if they're administering controlled substances, they'd have to have a permit. A VA, on the other hand, is there some kind of indirect supervision written order that they're following? The point is that staff providing services would also have to comply with the Veterinary Medical Practice Act.
Then we need to get these out on a website. I see that we got a new website because first of all, the ambulance is going to be doing some kind of veterinary thing, or else you wouldn't be having your animal transported. I mean, the reason I've had to use them is because the animal needed to stay in oxygen, right? And that seems to be the main reason. Otherwise, I'd put the animal in my car and drive them where they need to go and not pay an exorbitant amount of money, and I did not know any minimum standards at the time, and I asked the guy if he was an RVT, and he said yes, and I said, do you have a premise permit or something? And he said no, there was no permit, and it was a pickup truck with an oxygen tank in the back. I mean, so yeah, we need to do better on this somehow, some way.
So I think that there are the existing statutory and regulatory framework is there. I think we can do a better way of educating the consumers and also our licensing population, and to let them know that if they are doing this, they're under these statutes and regulations, and they're subject to inspections depending on their setup. So I think it's more of the education that we need to do, and really enforcement. So I would encourage you to let us know who's specifically what services you use, so we can look into it.
Kathy?
Yeah, and I think, I was just going to say, it's really about complaints and enforcement. The role of education is critical, but obviously our role is complaints.
Okay, so any questions from the public just on ambulances? Maybe what?
Okay, now getting back to dental radiography.
Now back to dental.
I appreciated the conversation that was had yesterday at the MDC meeting in regards to minimum standards versus standard of care. And that traditionally the Veterinary Medical Board has been focused on establishing minimum standards, where the veterinary community is more focused on standard of care. And standard of care is a moving target that I think has always been in the positive direction. The way we're practicing now is much better than the way we were practicing 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and 30 years ago. Dental radiography, I think, is heading in the right direction. Any sort of regulation or proposal that we might put forward may or may not increase the progression of that standard of care. And I appreciate the difficulties in requiring that to be done in veterinary hospitals. So the fact that no recommendation was put forward to this board, I understand why.
When I listened to that conversation yesterday, I agree that, of course, standard of care is a moving target, and the board does not decide decisions. We don't make decisions on standard of care for how to treat a vomiting dog or how to treat a dog with heartworm or anything else. But I think the real question is is, should a veterinarian or veterinary practice be required to have the equipment to provide dental radiography in those patients where the owner consents and where the owner, and where the veterinarian thinks it should be done? I think that's the question. That really wasn't addressed yesterday. So I guess the question is
Well,
whether...
I have a comment, a response to that, and that is that, especially in smaller communities, that would be something that they could refer to a practice that did have that capability, and that should be in the best judgment for the benefit of the patient and the client. So I think there are a lot of small communities where that would be extremely onerous to be able to do that, and they should, with due diligence, refer those cases.
But then they shouldn't be doing the dentals, or, like my vet in Laguna Beach, they have an ultrasound person come like every Wednesday, right? Because they can't afford or have the space for ultrasound there. And I think that this could be the same kind of thing. I don't think that you should provide a service where you're going to be doing a substandard care because you don't have this equipment and can't offer it. And I don't think that the consumer understands it enough. I certainly didn't understand all this until 3 surgeries later and $6,000 on top of other. So, I mean, it's kind of crazy, this dental thing, So.
Well, I agree with Dr. Nunez. I think that we're headed in the right direction. I
Yes.
think that
Within 20 years, for sure, it will be, no question, everybody will be doing it. And as far as cost, I mean, I can appreciate what you said, Dr. Nolan, but that same veterinarian, they all have x-ray machines. And the dental radiography costs much, much less than a regular x-ray machine. So anyway, it's what's the pleasure of this board? Is there a motion?
They're not going to do anything with it. This is something we've been talking about for a couple of years, and to think that it got tossed to them to come back in one conversation that we're not moving anything forward seems a little bit light, it seems. That's what I think.
Do you have a motion?
I mean, what would it be for them to research it more, or for us to come up with a minimum standard? I mean, we could probably come up with a very minimum standard that if somebody's going to be doing these dentals, that they either have access, like my vet with the ultrasound, or they send somebody somewhere, but you can't keep doing procedures on animals' mouths if you can't see inside what you're operating on.
Hey, Dr. Nunez.
I mean, there's nothing in regulations that even talks about how teeth should be cleaned, that they should be charted or scaled or
Right.
polished. The only thing that's in regulation is what can't be done, with the non-anesthetic cleaning, that it's defined as using a tool and all that. So to jump to making a requirement of having radiology done is just
But it's
a
not,
big
it's
leap.
not the requirement.
It's a big
So
leap.
what I'm talking about is not a requirement to have radiology done. It's a requirement to have the equipment to do it, if the client consents and if you decide it's necessary.
Is there
Just like you're required to have a regular x-ray machine. That's my
or
question.
the capability of
Yes.
doing it?
That's a good motion. That's a
Is-
good motion, actually. I'll make that motion somehow.
Okay, somehow. I'm confused.
I
Are
think we
you-
should, I
would it
think
be
you should
something-
restate that motion.
I know, and we got to figure out what
Yeah,
we're
but
doing with it.
what you were talking about, Cheryl, would that be, it's inserted into the requirements for a premises permit or something, that they must have
In the
that
same
kind
place
of
where it says
equipment?
that a veterinarian needs to have an x-ray machine.
That if they're going to
Nevada,
do
the state of
dentals.
Nevada has a requirement that veterinarians have the
Dental
equipment to do intraoral dental x-rays.
That's perfect.
Dr. Sullivan.
Well, it doesn't quite say that in our regulation. It says, or the ability to have radiographs taken. So, I said it yesterday. Maybe the first thing that we should do is those that weren't able to attend the meeting should listen to the discussion. It's on the webcast. The dilemma and the problem is on the disciplinary side, and that is that and it goes back to the standard of practice, a client can't waive certain procedures. So, you know, we're painting ourselves into a corner, and
I'd like a legal opinion on that, because that did come up yesterday, and I would like a legal opinion on that.
Okay, so the discussion about client consent came up yesterday, and ultimately what you guys need to know is that client consent is not important when the board is investigating negligence or incompetence of the practice by the vet or whomever, because you guys are regulating the practice itself, not what the client consented to. So as long as there's a deviation from the standard of care, which is evidence that would have to be presented by an expert witness on both sides, the client's consent is irrelevant in these cases. It's only relevant when the client actually brings a civil action against the veterinarian for a tort claim.
Okay, so I'm still more confused. Okay, so a client brings in a dog that's vomiting, and you say, I recommend that we x-ray the abdomen, and they say, no, I can't afford that. Then what do you do?
if you miss the diagnosis by not taking an x-ray, you are...
You have to go ahead and take an x-ray even though they're not paying for it?
That's the message I'm hearing.
Right, well, on presentation of the animal, what is the veterinarian doing to figure out what's wrong? So do the symptoms require you to perform an x-ray? Then you would consult with the client and say, this is what I think it is. We should do an x-ray. I need your authority. It's not consent, it's their authority for you to treat the animal. So if they say, I can't afford that, then the vet is, should, minimum standard, discuss options on treatment.
Of course.
Right, so.
Of course, and they still decline it.
That's authority, it's not consent to doing something substandard.
Right.
The main point here is that the veterinarian is providing all of the appropriate options to the client for their authority.
So as long as we provide the options.
Right, as long as you're providing them.
Options.
Correct information as you assess the animal.
Right, okay.
And if the owner declines?
And if the owner declines, then?
That does not obviate negligence or incompetence.
Correct.
Okay.
We're kind of at a stalemate.
Can I give an example?
Dr. Nunez, I don't know if we need any more examples.
How about this? I still have faith that the standard of care is always going in the right direction. Kathy said that there are a lot of new members on the MDC that perhaps need a little bit more direction from us, and to quell the motion to make regulations by Judy, what if we just refer back to the MDC, specifically the question, do they think that we should discuss that issue of at least having the capability of doing it? I suspect what their answer will be, but can we put it back to them?
Okay, I just think it's wrong. If I don't care if it's a small community or a big community. If I take my cat or a dog to a vet and the cat has stomatitis, and they say, we have to extract the teeth for stomatitis because it's attacking the teeth. Okay, great, extract the teeth. And the cat still has stomatitis. Why? Because the roots were left in. How on earth are you doing your job as a veterinarian if you can't do an x-ray? You shouldn't be performing that task. Period, end of story.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Done.
So, Dr. Nunez, there's a motion there?
Yes, and this is going to answer your question.
Because you had
To
sort of an
specifically-
emotion, so.
To refer back to the MDC's specific question on whether or not there should be a requirement for there to have access to performing dental radiographs.
Okay.
Similar to what's in
Second.
the.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
And if they're really going to do the job this time, because I thought that's what we sent to them before, and I know they've been short-staffed and there's turnover and whatnot, but we need to be very clear here, because to me, it's very black and white. Either you have this capability, it comes in once a week, you don't have the capability, you send it out to somebody that does, or you don't do that procedure.
Yes.
Okay,
It was my understanding that the committee discussed whether or not it should be the standard of care in every case, not necessarily whether the equipment should be available or have the ability to. So I think that was a separate thing that the committee didn't really dive into. It was more focused on the standard of care and being able to provide that to every single patient.
Yeah, I don't think I'm asking for too much here. Thank you.
Yeah, it's just a separate issue.
Okay.
I thought it was discussed.
Just kidding.
I thought it was discussed. I thought it was part of the discussion, and, but if you want the MDC to look at it again, they can. I mean, there's no problem with that. I thought the discussion was very thorough and in-depth, and that no action item was advanced at this time, was.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other, Tara?
My question is, if they are required to have access to the dental rads, but do not perform them or send the client to have them performed, isn't that what we're really talking about? Is identifying the need for the rads. And if they're not doing that today, that is the incompetent and/or negligent practice. So if they're performing extractions without x-rays, is it incompetence or negligence? And that's when we get to the standard of care issue.
And right now, it wouldn't be.
So I think they can discuss that at the MDC, but Dr. Sullivan?
Well, the fact is, many times, you're going to eliminate veterinarians from doing dentistry. You are, because.
I disagree, but.
They would have a limitation.
Listen.
Not
If-
eliminate.
If you are doing dentistries, oftentimes, and it looks like it's a straightforward dental, you get in there and there may be a slab fracture that you couldn't see because of the tartar and plaque. If you have a slab fracture, you need to remove that tooth. Now you're saying, if you don't have a dental x-ray to make sure that that root isn't removed, now you're saying, now the end result is there are veterinarians that are going to refuse to do dentals because they don't have a dental x-ray, and they're not going to be able to provide basic dental services for lower income communities. That's the reality of life.
And I think that's okay. I think that in a case of stomatitis where it can come back and attack the roots, it would be mandatory to get those roots out of there, and that's a different situation.
Not a
Okay,
different situation.
Kathy?
Okay.
Again, I think what Dick just mentioned, what Judy's talking about, there's a lot of elements here, and I do think that having MDC really
Yes.
go into it and look at the cost of the equipment, look at standard of care, look at everything, and then potentially come back, if there is something to come back with,
Yeah,
is it worthwhile?
So we have a motion and a second, and Dr. Nolan?
If we are sending it back to the MDC, I would like them to really do some research on how many complaints we've received on this exact medical condition and whether this has been a serious consumer protection issue or not, because I could list a lot of different diagnostic procedures, and if we want to go down that road, then maybe everybody ought to have an ultrasound, or everybody ought to have this, or, I think that's a slippery slope.
And so we can try to do that, but I can tell you that the way that the database is configured, it's not to pull specific procedures. It's really on the case type, so allegations of negligence or incompetence. So if you want really to delve into specific procedures, we're talking a long time to go through each one to determine what procedure was involved. So is that really necessary? And if so, it's going to take a lot longer than November.
You can't query on a keyword.
No, no.
Oh, my.
Tara?
I just have a request to restate the motion and make a clear question to send back to the MDC.
Dr. Nunez?
Refer back to the MDC, the specific question on whether or not a veterinarian should be required to at least have dental radiography capability or access to capability. Maybe if we can read what's this passage, Dick, that about what the requirement is for regular x-rays? How is that written?
The veterinary premises shall have the capacity to render diagnostic radiographic services either on the premises or through other commercial facilities. Radiographic procedures shall be conducted in accordance with health and safety code and standards. Again,
So then specifically, the motion would be to perhaps add including dental radiography.
That's reasonable.
But again,
I know.
you're not going to know
Diane's
if you
here.
need a radiograph
I know.
on a
But
straightforward
that's,
dental.
but that's just the motion to go back
Diane's
to the
got to set us
MDC.
straight here.
I just want to, I want to caution and maybe suggest something, caution that, you're the Board of Veterinary Medical, you're the Veterinary Medical Board for all of California veterinarians. And so I want to just caution that, and I think it's a little bit reflective of what Dr. Sullivan sort of intimated.
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing.
That's a surprise.
Is your mic on?
Speak to the
Okay.
mic, please.
Can you hear me now? Is that?
And identify yourself, you didn't.
Oh, Diane Sokoloff, Supervising Deputy Attorney General, liaison to the Board of Veterinary Medical Board, the Veterinary Medical Board. But anyway, I'm just saying that, there's a range of veterinarians working in California, and, you are representative of all of them. And so when you're thinking of regulations and such like that, it's important to consider all of the variety of veterinarians working in California, both in remote locations and in big cities. So your regulation should reflect, the totality of the veterinarians working in California. And then another thing to consider, either with the multidisciplinary committee or yourselves, is the extent to which you want to possibly invite some comment from the public, the veterinarian public, and possibly notifying or indicating on your website or something that you're going to be discussing these issues at the multidisciplinary committee, so you get a variety of comments as to whether or not people who work in the field are in agreement or have some issues that you might not have, or the multidisciplinary committee might not have thought about. Because this is an issue if and maybe some of you might not know or know me from a long time. I've always cautioned about over-regulating, making too many laws, too many requirements, because all that does, it can sometimes be sort of counter to what you're trying to do, counterproductive. That's not to say I don't think you should do what you're doing. I just want you to consider some of these issues that come up. So those are my...
I agree, Diane, except for the ones we represent can't speak. So we have to look out for their best interest. And, I've worked with shelters and whatnot in East LA, South LA. I've been to the middle of the state where, I understand exactly what you're getting to, but at the same time, it's like, we got to look out for their best interest too. So it's really tough, isn't it?
Any
Thank
other
you.
comments from the board? Any
No.
comments from the public?
Bonnie Lutz. I just want to ditto what Diane just said completely, and make two other comments. That this whole issue is really a standard of care issue that should be ultimately determined by veterinarians who are in the field. So whether an intraoral x-ray should be done in a specific circumstance is just like whether a lab test should be done or another kind of x-ray should be done or some other procedure should be done. It's something that's determined by veterinarians. And then the other thing is that I do a lot of these. I probably singly do more than all the other people spread out. And I've only had one case that had anything to do with intraoral x-rays, and I've done over 500 of them. That one specifically went to hearing, but the issue there was that a previous veterinarian had promised intraoral x-rays. And then because of the way things happened, my particular client ended up being the one doing the dental, not knowing that the intraoral x-rays had been promised and discussed. So that was really the only reason why it went to hearing. It didn't go to hearing necessarily because of the negligence of my client for not doing the x-rays. It was more complicated.
Valerie Fenstermaker, CVMA, and just before going too far down the road, I would ask that, first of all, is it the purview of the board to require a licensed professional to have equipment if they have the ability to access that equipment somewhere else? Because, and also to research what other medical professions do, because I assume, you've all been to your doctor and they don't all have x-ray equipment in their practice, but they have the ability to send you over and have your foot x-rayed if it's broken. So would that be appropriate for every physician in California to be required to have x-ray equipment if they have the ability to send it out? And is it appropriate to require that in veterinary medicine? Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? Okay, so we have a motion and a second. You want to call for the vote?
Dr. Waterhouse?
Yes.
Dr. Sullivan?
No.
Ms. Bowler?
Yes.
Ms. Laredo? Ms. Mancuso?
Yes.
Dr. Nolan?
No.
Dr. Nunez?
Yes.
Ms. Yanis?
Yes.
So we have,
Hold on. Okay. How many is that?
we have 5 yeses and 2 nos.
If there are 6 more members, okay, we have 5.
Yeah.
Right? All right.
Motion carries.
Motion carries.
What was the vote?
5-2
Dr.
and 1
Nunez.
absent.
The last thing I want to say is good job on the shelter medicine. Keep it up.
Okay.
Dr. Sullivan.
Are we all done with the
MDC.
I think so.
MDC report?
I think so.
Okay, on to agenda item number 6, update discussion and possible action on proposed regulations. So A is status of pending regulations, and Amanda and Ethan are going to go through this.
Okay, so on the first part there, there's the flow chart that just I include for reference for everybody that talks about the standard rulemaking process.
I have a clarification on the flow chart. I just want to make it clear that when there's a notation that a file is in pre-review under tab A, if they look at the flow chart, that looks like 1 through 4, stages 1 through 4, but most of the regulatory packages listed under tab A are in initial analysis phase. So I'm making this clarification because it looks like things are just stuck in pre-review, and they're not. They've actually already been through pre-review, and now they're in the initial analysis, starting with item number 5 on that flow chart. So quite a bit of work has been performed already. Just want everybody to know what's going on.
Thank you, Tara. Is there any questions about how this flows? Dr.
Nunez.
So I have a question from the representatives from DCA who made the very, very quick presentation earlier. One part of your presentation said that you were helping to improve this process. Is it because this process seems to take years, and it's frustrating how long it takes. So is there any encouraging words you would like to say on what DCA is doing to help this process from moving along?
Absolutely. Happy to share a bit more about the improvements that we're making to the regulatory review process. Want to preface this by saying, writing regulations is a tough job, and want to make sure that what is put out to the public is subject to public comment and thorough review to make sure that the regs are high quality. But throughout this whole process, want to reiterate that the department is truly committed to continuously improve our regulatory review process. So throughout this process, if board members of staff have feedback on how we can improve, definitely welcome to have that input. The department changed its processes in late 2016 to improve the quality of the regulations that we submit to the Office of Administrative Law. We are happy to report that since December of 2016, there's been a steady improvement in the disapproval rate of regulations. So back in September 2016, the disapproval rate for regulations was 21.8%. And then now we are at only 7.6% being disapproved between July 2017 and February 2018. And in 2018, we actually had 0 disapprovals. However, as we made these changes to the regulatory review process, even though we've lowered the disapproval rates, we do acknowledge that the review time have significantly increased. So in order to reduce the review timelines, but ensure that we still have quality regulations, the department has or is implementing the 4 following steps. So I'm going to walk through them really quickly. The first one is training. Regulation development is a collaborative effort between boards and staff. So to improve the knowledge base of those writing regulations, the department offered 3 separate training class to staff for writing regulations. So we had one training in November 2017, another one in April 2018, and another one in May 2018. And the goal is to really better equip staff with preparing rulemaking files and cut down on the level of scrutiny needed to review packages. Second step, we've tried to...
So has our staff gone through this training?
Yes.
So we're going to write it correct the first time?
That's the goal.
Okay.
And your legal counsel presented one of those trainings, so they're well prepared.
Okay.
Second step, we've cut the layers of review. So working with board staff, we identified where there's, folks were feeling that there were duplicative step reviews. So we cut that down to make sure that the steps that we removed, are not necessary, but also did not water down the quality of the review process. We've done some internal restructuring to consolidate review functions and reduce the amount of time that was lost transferring files between different entities and departments that are involved in the regulatory review process.
Okay, so to address that point, there was this whole North Carolina dental issue that the Supreme Court did a couple of years ago, and my impression was that just increased the amount of review that the DCA was doing because they didn't want to get into trouble in the same way that the dental board in North Carolina did. So I'm getting conflicting messages about decreasing the review or increasing the review.
I would argue that DCA has had a very good review process, and if we're talking about North Carolina, there have always been significant levels of review, which have been very important in substantiating California's rulemaking, specifically DCA's rulemaking from boards. This is because for 20, 30 years, they go through the DCA legal division. They have to receive approval from the DCA director. That's step one, and that DCA director is not affiliated or licensed by any particular board, which is important because the whole argument in North Carolina was licensed professionals were trying to keep other licensed professionals out of practice.
And so that's an added step,
So
not
that's-
necessarily a decreased step?
It's an existing step that has always been there, and it's very important, which helps substantiate our own rulemaking. The next step would be OAL, which is a completely separate third party that reviews everything. So as far as North Carolina goes, we've been covered with those two steps, and we continue to be covered with those two steps.
And last thing I will mention is a computer tracking system, and the department is developing a DC-wide regulation tracking system to better manage time and track regulations that go through the process, understanding that there are hundreds of them across all 30 boards and bureaus. So combining all of these steps together, we are confident that these steps will improve the review timelines. But as I mentioned in the beginning, always happy to receive feedback from both at the staff level or at the board level in terms of how we can improve that review process.
I mean, if you look at our agenda today, it's full of nothing but more mistakes and revisions that need to be made on things that we've talked about for years now. So I like the words, but I just don't see the results of it. It still needs improvement.
Sounds good.
Okay, go ahead,
Oh,
Jessica.
I just have a clarifying question, Patrick, and thank you for giving us the percentages of the improvement, because I think that's beneficial. The 20 said 25% versus now it was 7%, now it's 0% in 2018. What are the actual numbers, or do you have that with you? Because if we're submitting in the past, say 100 packets are getting through and we're at 28% disapproval rate, and then we did 5 in 2018 and it's 0%, to me that's not really indicative of a fixed process because there's less movement being done. So maybe you and I can work offline to get the actual numbers to see, but I also really appreciate the computer tracking system. I think that's where the transparency is going to come up, and we can really see how long it's taking. So I think that's a fantastic thing from DCA. So thank you for that.
Judy.
Well, I think that we can see the transparency if it's built into the system. I mean, obviously, you need to know where the bottlenecks are, right? I mean, if this is the beginning and this is the end, how long does each process take at what level? And I was going to ask our own staff if we had that after going through the packet and seeing, this lack of movement on things as Dr. Nunez says that we've been working on for years. So, with these systems that come online, of course, you read about them in the paper. A lot of them have cost a lot of money and have come up short, like Breeze. And, to what we were just talking about, when we want to query the different types of cases to learn from things, the fact that we can't bring back results based on what that case was about, I mean, that's a huge deficiency.
Well, I need to clarify that one. It's not that we can't search for the word type, it's that we didn't input the data to search for. So the system's only going to do what we design it to do. And if we've never specifically tracked procedures in cases, then we're not going to be able to pull procedures from Breeze. So that's not a Breeze issue, that's a design and
Okay, if it's not a Breeze issue, then you should add those keywords somehow now so that you can in the future do the search. And so my question getting back to you was, of this and with the new system, you will be keeping track of each step, and you'll be able to query that and know where the bottlenecks are and then go work with them.
That's correct, and I think we're still in the stage of developing the requirement for this computer tracking system.
Well, that's the part that always seems to be forgotten in the state of California, and it's like, information technology 101. It's like you got to get it up front, not after the fact and oops. So I hope you guys do the best that you can to build those requirements up front.
Absolutely, appreciate
All
the
right,
feedback, and we'll be working very closely with the exec officer to make sure that as we build the system, the requirements from the board are met.
Got to get them all in there.
Yeah. As I look through this list, is it possible for us to prioritize these different regulations other than the way they are right now?
Yeah, and I think that what would be helpful is what I used to present at my prior board is we put in the rulemaking calendar that we're required to submit to kind of give OAL an idea of their workload coming up. And that also gives the board an idea of where staff sees the regulations falling. And then at that point, if the board decides, this regulation is more important than the other one, then we can move it up into the calendar. So we are making sure that your priorities are aligned with what we're submitting to OAL.
Well,
we can do that.
I think that we had priorities originally, but now looking at these things and seeing where they are in the process, we may not want to reprioritize them, maybe as Dick is saying, based on that some are stuck, in places where we didn't. This gives us visibility, which is a good thing.
Yes.
Tara?
Unfortunately, the biggest bottleneck has been at the board staff level. So,
I thought it was OAL.
well, if you look at your list, you'll see that you have a very long list, and the ones at the top were just initiated for rulemaking packages within the past 6 months. And Amanda Drummond has been working so hard to get all of, what you see today through, written, perfect, working.
Is
with me
Amanda
through
the only
peer
one
review.
writing regulations?
Yes.
Why?
That's how it's structured right now. We are looking at the entire thing and processes and also taking things off of Amanda's plate that she's focusing on where I would like her to be solely dedicated to
It's
regulations.
like we need 3 people doing this full-time.
So currently, she's working on a lot of other duties, when we discussed minutes, and that taking up a lot of time to do. I want to look at what is on that desk to reassess priorities and distribute when necessary, and potentially look at other staff addressing that issue.
But
So
you
the
heard the
analysis-
cutting back on the minutes. I mean, it's one thing
I
that.
think we should just let Jessica, because she's
I
new
need to
and
analyze
she needs
it.
to.
Right, okay.
She's in
Yeah.
the process
Give her a
of
chance.
analyzing it. Give her a chance, and she can report back at the next meeting.
Okay, only one more meeting to give you a chance though, Jessica.
Okay.
Finish my point, I would
Yes.
like to somehow suggest that both drug compounding and animal rehab should have a very high priority. Both are issues that are going to be, if not already, time-sensitive. So I would like to move that those 2 items receive the highest priority that we have.
Is there a second?
No, I think that we should go through each one. I think that Dick has jumped ahead. I think that we should look at all these together as a board and then come up with our priorities and take a look, because we've been stuck here. So let us advance to the next place before
Dr. Nunez.
I
just
second
Dick
the motion.
priority.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Are you serious? You're not, okay, well, we have time to talk about it.
Tara?
Could I just
Jesus.
raise a consideration that your disciplinary guidelines are up for review here, and they take
Yes.
an extraordinary amount of time, and they're extremely important.
Would you like to amend your?
No,
I think he's jumping way ahead here. I think we need to slow down, Dick. We're not, one thing at a time.
Amanda, would you like to say something?
Please. I have started, Tara and I have been working very diligently on the disciplinary guidelines. They're obviously before you today for further considerations. And then I've also been working at the same time on the RVT education ones, which are also before you today. If you want to move up any of them, that is obviously 100% your decision, but those are already in the process.
Say what they are again?
Disciplinary guidelines and RVT education, those are 2 I am actively working on. So I can, of course, it's up to you. I can always put those on hold and move something else up, but since they are already in the process, I would like to continue moving forward with them. But it's 100% to you.
the motion is not to stop what you're,
Yes, it
Not
would
to-
be. She's the only one doing it.
Can I finish my sentence?
Yeah.
Okay. My motion is to give them higher priority. I didn't say to do them in lieu of doing other work. So as things move, because of very time-sensitive issues, animal rehab is on the 1, 2, 3, 4th page. And we've been working on that for 8 years plus. So anyway, the motion is prioritized. It's not to change what is
We
already
have a
in the
motion and a
process.
second. Any other
But now we
comments from
get
the
board discussion, right?
Yes, any other comments from the board? Judy?
Okay, so there's uniform standards for abuse, right? The number one thing that we're supposed to be doing is protecting animals. Why is abuse so low on the list? That would be one. Drug compounding, what were your 2 priorities you just voted on?
Drug
Animal
compounding
rehab.
and animal rehab.
And animal rehab. And animal rehab, CPEI has been going on for just as long. I just want to, have a second to talk about stuff. I mean, if you ask Nancy, the RVT stuff has been so important to them and has been going on forever. Emergency animal care, I don't even know what this one is anymore. What's that one? That's
Okay.
new. Okay, hold on, I'm not done yet. Directors to supervise animal rehabilitation. Animal rehabilitation is still at the beginning of the process. I mean, RVT education is a little further. The ones that are further ahead, if she can get moved off her desk, right, because they're so close, you should focus on the ones that can be passed off to somebody else. Well, the motion is wrong, and I want it to be reconsidered here.
Yep, we have a motion and a second, though.
Right, and I'm still on my board comments, and my board comments is, no, time is not up, hold on. If you have, if you're working on something and it's further in the process and you can pass it off before you then go to the next thing, wouldn't it be good to get those done first?
We understand your point.
I'm not saying not to do it.
Well, then we should prioritize the whole thing that's in the same status.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other comments from the board? Any comments from, Tara?
Well, and I understand where we are in this discussion, but I also would think before we even vote on a motion, I know we're in discussion on it, we should really hear from staff about a little bit more about where they are on these things and what's appropriate timing-wise and what's not. No disagreement with Dr. Sullivan that animal rehab and, which was the other one?
Drug compounding.
Drug compounding are big issues with MDC's been dealing with, and we have been dealing with them. But I mean, rather than cherry pick, I think we should see the full picture, and then maybe it's more appropriate to leave some of this to staff with our input about what we feel as a board is the most important thing. But that's just my thing.
So the bills on the first page are already into initial analysis, so those are very far in the process. There's nothing for Amanda to do at this time, significant work. She's maintaining their status.
So is that fee schedule, you're saying the first page?
The first
fee schedule,
page.
CP?
They're written. They're where they need to be. Staff doesn't need to do any significant work on those right now.
Okay, good.
On
So
the second
we'll put check
page,
marks by them.
Disciplinary guidelines and RVT education, she's started those.
Just started.
The next one is drug compounding, and I suspect perhaps what Dr. Sullivan was suggesting, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that drug compounding would stay where it is, but we would move animal rehab up.
Yeah, fine, if it works. I'm just, it's a general statement. It's not ordering you to do X, Y, Z. It's a general statement that we've got some time issues that in my opinion, these two things are going to be greatly affected, so.
I think we should.
It's up to staff, but it's a comment as to prioritizing.
Well, we should prioritize them all.
Any other comments from the public? Okay.
I just have one last comment to address Kathy's statement. I love my staff, I really do, but there's a reason why we were appointed to this board is because we do have a very good knowledge of what is going on in veterinary medicine right now, and there are certain priorities that we have that are important for consumer protection and important for the veterinary profession as a whole. And perhaps the staff doesn't know what really needs to get done first.
Right.
Yes.
Well, we should
Okay.
always make
So we have a motion second. Should we call for the vote?
Can you repeat the motion, please?
Yeah, I think you may want to reform it.
It's been so long ago. I move that staff consider prioritizing the two items mentioned, drug compounding and animal rehabilitation. It's actually animal physical rehabilitation, to a higher priority without interfering with their present work.
You added that. But I
Okay.
seconded it.
Call for the vote?
Dr. Waterhouse?
Yes.
Dr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Ms. Bowler?
Yes.
Ms. Laredo? Ms. Mancuso?
No.
Dr. Nolan?
Yes.
Dr. Nunez?
Yes.
Ms. Yanis?
Yes.
All right, motion carries.
Motion carries. Are we done discussing 6A?
Can I ask another question?
Yes.
Sorry, guys. Just in reading, and I love this format because it's very helpful to see where things are, but in the uniform standards for abuse, because this happened, right around when I got on board, but it says it was approved, but then on hold per legal. Does anybody recall why? Is that a bigger picture than this vet board? Because
Yes,
it's
it
got
was-
the penal code and things like that in
It was
it?
across the board held for a couple of years.
Yeah, I just wondered what the history is.
At the DCA level.
Okay.
It wasn't our level.
No, it doesn't say it's from us. It says it's
We were
per legal.
told, put it on the back burner. We've got other issues to clarify.
Maybe staff
Got
could
it.
get back to us next board meeting on that one, unless Tara knows something about it.
I don't know any specifics for that time
Because that should be a top priority.
The only thing I can imagine is that either the uniform standards were in process or were being reconsidered.
Wasn't that the regulations written due to a major bill
Yes.
several years ago?
Yeah, it didn't pass.
And then it hit the skids, and everybody said, we did a whole bunch of work on it. We spent over a year on it, and then it was hold everything because
Well,
we
let's
got
get
to
it back
things-
out and make it happen.
So, and I don't know if Patrick can speak to it right now, but it was my understanding that that was always a high priority from DCA and the legislature, and many boards put them in effect. I think optometry did in 2013, and I know it's been a sunset issue every year for DCA. They want to know the status of them and how many boards are implementing the uniform standards. So I'm not aware of anything coming from DCA saying, stop what you're doing. In fact, I think it was the opposite, where DCA said, these are the things that you can implement after those bills died. The CPEI, the SB 1111.
Right.
When those bills died, DCA came back and did a review and said, okay, these are things that you can do in regulation now. There was a brief period for the uniform standards, because in statute, what was said is that for the uniform standards, there has to be a committee that adopts those uniform standards that all boards have to do. So there was a brief period of time to put them on hold, to allow that committee to then meet and come up with the uniform standards. Once that committee adopted the uniform standards, it was always the understanding of the it was communicated to me from DCA is that, okay, now that they're adopted, you guys go and implement them.
Okay.
And so,
But we're not doing that. We just made it a lower priority
so
still.
it's been my understanding for this board is at the same time they were doing the disciplinary guidelines that needed to get through quickly. And so it was amended multiple times, and so we're to a point where we need something in the disciplinary guidelines, and the concern was if you put in the uniform standards on top of that at the same time, it's going to slow it down. So I think that's where it was.
Part of the uniform standards holdup was that one board initiated the process through rulemaking, so they started it all off to see what would work and what would pass OAL muster, and the first package was disapproved by OAL. So then there was a mad scramble for all the other boards trying to figure out, well, what are we supposed to do? How is this supposed to be constructed so that it's clear, meets all of the standards for rulemaking, and would get through OAL. So that was part of the breakdown, was fashioning the rulemaking package itself so that it would be approved. That's the best I can figure on the holdup for that period of time, because there was a disapproval and a revamping, and then I think you had a lot of other priorities occur in the meantime.
Okay, Kathy?
Yeah, is this something that we might be able to ask Tara as legal counsel to investigate and review? It does sound like there's a legal component to this, and get back to us about what the
already know.
holdup is
We
and how we
already
can
know.
move forward.
We already know, it was a top priority. I mean,
Well, we're
Jessica said
hearing
it too.
what we think, but I'm just wondering. I don't know.
Judy?
Okay, I think the motion should be that we look at the regulations, not that first page and not what she's in the middle of, but everything else and prioritize. And we prioritize based on what is immediate needs that would help the animals, not necessarily animal rehabilitation. I know it's a big thing, but disciplinary guidelines, number one, wait, are you working on disciplinary guidelines? Okay, so that one's off the table. But if there's other things like the abuse, obviously, they should come before it. I think we should have looked at the whole thing and prioritized them all, especially if there's only one person working on it. And hopefully we get more people working on it and they know what our priority is.
I think we should allow Jessica to do her job.
But Jessica doesn't know what our priorities are.
So what I'd like to do is to go back and look at where all the rulemaking packets are, determine the amount of resources that are needed for each one, and then bring back a prioritized list from staff recommendation, including the motion that was passed, and have that up in the higher priority, and make recommendations for all of them of where they fit in priority, and then the board can come back and say yes or no, move this up, and have that full discussion. But I also want to look at the existing process to see if there's anything we can do internally to streamline our staff process.
I think that's given you a lot of work to do when we could cut to the chase. Number one, we've never had this kind of visibility before, and we know where the packages are. I'm going to make a motion that we, as a board, look at these regulations and prioritize them right now for staff and get them done.
Is there a second? Okay, let's move on.
You gotta be kidding me.
Let's move on.
Jesus Christ.
So, now we're going to go on to one more important topics of 6B, okay, at noon? Okay. Regarding minimum standards for veterinary premises and practices, and Ethan's going to talk about this. And we are going to break it, just give you a heads up, we're going to break at noon. Oh, sorry, my mic's not on. So, 6B. Sorry, Amanda's doing it.
Okay.
6B.
So 6B, that's the amend sections 20302, 203.5 regarding minimum standards for alternate veterinary premises. So this has been an ongoing discussion with the MDC and CVMA since October 2017 was when CVMA brought their findings to the MDC meeting. And then at the February 2018 meeting, the MDC went through the language and they approved it, and so now it's at the board for your consideration and review.
So this is going to be added to the list that we're refusing to prioritize? Is that what we're doing? We're adding it to that list? Is it going to the bottom? I hope it's going to the bottom, unless there's some real reason.
Okay, how would you like to discuss these? Dr. Sullivan, would you like to start? This came from the MDC, so.
Okay, I think it's on. Just to give you a little background, on the task force that CVMA put together, Anne Marie and I were there as board members. Val and Dr. Miller were there. There's probably, I think, 12 or 13 people. We had all-day meetings. It took us, I think, 7 sessions to go through this a number of times. After that, the MDC went through it line by line. And so what you have in front of you on the first part is the working document. If you go back a little bit further, then you're going to have a clean copy. And so I don't know what your preference is. I think we probably should maybe go over the clean copy if everybody is there. And I would add that when we did the MDC meeting, Bonnie Lutz was there and had a lot of great input. After that meeting, I went back and listened to the meeting and made all of the changes that I noted. and Amanda and Tara did the same thing. So the clean copy has the changes that were proposed at the MDC level, and that's what you have in front of you. We also, can we also list the document that has the...
Citations?
Yeah. So we have, this is the original that also noted where these different regulatory lines came from. So what happened in 2030 originally was the fixed veterinary premises regulation. What we've done and suggested is that we change 2030 to be more of a introduction to minimum standards in different practices. So the end result was we decided to use a format where each type of practice is listed separately with all of their minimum standards. So if somebody wants to get a premise permit for small animal mobile facility, they go to that section and the minimum standards are all there. They don't have to flip back and forth between other sections. So we ended up getting sections for small animal fixed facility, small animal mobile facility, small animal vaccination practice, small animal house call practice, and large animal ambulatory. I didn't write that down, but I think that's what it is. So if we're all set, we'll start on the clean page, section 2030, and that title is going to be changed. It may be just minimum standards. We have to remove the fixed veterinary premises. There could be a more appropriate name for that too, so that we'll leave staff up to. My question on this, after looking at it, I think, 100th time, that second sentence in that definition
Is confusing.
well, not only that, but it comes from a different section. It comes from statute. And I'm wondering if it's necessary, Tara.
Okay, I was looking some other things up. I just want to confirm where we're at. Are we on 2030?
Yes.
Second sentence? Okay. Right, so that one I inserted at the last meeting because if we don't clarify the mobile unit exemption when it is practicing from a permitted facility, this regulation could look like we're sidestepping the exemption already provided under the statute. So I just wanted to make clear that this doesn't create new requirements for mobile units outside of what they are already required to do under the statute.
I as well find this difficult to read. I know what you're getting at, but I think there needs to be some clarification.
No, we don't want to do notwithstanding. We actually want to refer everyone to the existing exemption. So perhaps it would be more of a pursuant to the exemption for mobile units provided under the statute.
To me, part of the confusion, sorry.
Dr. Nunez.
So I certainly understand that a mobile facility that is not associated with a fixed practice needs to have its own permit and needs to meet minimum standards. I also understand that if there is a mobile unit that is associated with fixed practice, then they don't require a separate permit because it's associated with that fixed practice. But does that mean that there are no minimum standards at all? I could have a pickup truck that's practicing veterinary medicine, but I don't need a premise permit because it's associated with my fixed practice.
So inspectors go out, do they inspect the mobile unit as well as the fixed premises?
Probably not.
I assume?
I don't know for sure, but I would assume that they are, but I can verify that.
They do.
So I would assume so too. So I think that that's what the language was attempting to address. What Tara said, we don't want to create additional regulation for this mobile unit that's associated with my practice, but I would somehow like to capture that it still should have some minimum standards, not necessarily needs a separate premise permit, but at least it should have some standards.
Dr. Sullivan?
Can't we reference 4853B, which says, mobile units and vehicles shall be exempt from independent registration with the board when they are operated from a building or facility which is the licensing manager's principal place of business, and the building is registered with the board?
So what I'm looking at here is 4853 is already cited in the first sentence. So perhaps we just cite it there and then clarify in the ISOR the initial statement of reasons, the rulemaking package, that the board is maintaining the exemption for mobile units already associated with a premises permit, and strike that second sentence entirely, because I guess it would be redundant and duplicative of statute.
Or maybe refer specifically, I mean, we're referencing all of 4853, but 4853B is really what we're clarifying. Maybe we need to reference that section B. I don't know. I'll leave that up to legal.
What is 4853?
The reference to a general section includes any subdivision that must be specifically limited to the subdivision.
Okay.
So by referencing the full statute, it necessarily includes.
Can you come up to the...
Yeah, so the issue is whether or not we need to specifically call out the exemption, because we're basically saying that these are a bunch of new premises that need to be compliant with minimum standards. So what we could do in the beginning of that first sentence is say, unless otherwise exempt. The facilities and practice types in sections 2030.1 through 2030.5 are premises pursuant to section 4853 of the code.
But we don't want any other exemptions, do we?
We're just trying to maintain the existing exemption. So we could also do unless exempt under 4853B.
But I guess I don't consider that an exemption. What it's saying in 4853B is that, well, okay, if you want to define it that way, they still need a premises permit, but you're saying the vehicle is exempt.
Correct. The mobile unit, as long as the mobile unit is associated with a premises permit, it is exempt pursuant to the existing terms of 4853B.
Okay.
So we're just maintaining that exemption.
Dr. Nunez?
I think this would work if we cross out the second line of that first section. On a separate issue, we might have to go back and evaluate 4853. That exemption may need some cleaning up, but I think that this whole package is beautiful, well done. We just need to cut out that second line.
Second sentence?
That second sentence of the first paragraph.
Yeah.
Are you okay with that, Tara?
Yes, as long as we add at the beginning of the first sentence, unless exempt pursuant to section 4853B of the code, comma, the facilities.
Okay. Dr. Nolan?
I was just going to say, I think that it would be easier to do that than to go back and clean up an existing regulatory statute.
Yeah.
And I do think that that sentence is very is difficult to understand.
Yep. you tell me when to stop.
Yes, so we have to stop at noon
So
due to a board member request.
that takes care of 2030. The next section is 2030.05, which is existing regulation. There are a couple of cleanup items there. I don't see any substantive change. Then it goes to, getting my pages mixed up here. It goes to 2030.1, small animal fixed facility. So I think what we'll do is take page by page, if there is any questions, concerns, let's address them page by page.
Okay, Dr. Nolan.
Well, I do have a question or a concern that is not going to be addressed page by page because there's some discrepancy in the requirements for radiological services. It appears to me that if you look at the version that is the strike-through and the deleted and added version, you have removed the words "or through other commercial facilities" from the first one. Then it's added again on page 8 of, it's in page 8 of 12 of the underlined new verbiage for small animal mobile facilities. So you've left it into that, in that one, in the old version. But then it appears to disappear again.
Okay.
So I guess my main question is,
It depends on the discipline, it depends on the minimum standards for that practice. So let's go through each one, and then I think I can explain.
but what I'm saying is on page 4 of 18 of the strike-through clean version, it's gone. So it was in the old one, underlined and not struck through, and now in the new one, I'm just checking with you because.
Okay, which?
Okay, page 4?
So, okay, let me see if I can make it clear, because it's confusing.
yeah,
So if you
which
go,
letter?
if you go to the original version with edits.
Right.
I'm on the original version with edits, and I am on page, hold on, sorry.
Page 4 of 12.
Now I'm getting confused. Page 8, yeah, page 8 of 12, thank you. I've got too many pages now. Okay, so on page 8 of 12, down at L, you have the wording, "shall have the ability to provide diagnostic radiological services on the premises or through other commercial facilities." And then radiological procedures shall be conducted in accordance with health and safety code standards.
Okay, so that's under mobile facility.
Yes.
Okay,
So
so
then
let's
if
just
you
go
go
back
to
to
mobile
fixed.
facility in your clean version, that is gone. In mobile facility clean version, which is on page 4 of 8 on the clean version.
Oh, it is.
Here it is.
She's right.
Mobile facility.
It just leaves out the other commercial facility totally.
Oh, it leaves that right.
Okay, but you're just talking mobile.
Well, I'm just pointing out a discrepancy.
Okay,
I'm
so
just
can we-
questioning whether I'm missing something, but.
Can we just go to, let's just talk about fixed.
So which,
No, she's
No,
pointing out
she's
there's
got
a
it.
missing
I know, I'm trying to,
section.
I know, but I think there's a reason for it, and let me find, now,
Yeah.
on page 4, what line are we
Well,
talking about?
I guess my issue is that you call this a clean version with no markup, but it is not the same as the version that has
So
markup.
what I had said was, the clean version is after we went through all of this. This was what was presented to the MDC. The clean version is what was discussed during the MDC meeting and then changed because of that meeting.
Okay, I didn't understand that. I was just trying to point out that it looked like there was a discrepancy. I didn't see any others really, or very few, so.
But let's go to that.
Okay.
The same item on the fixed premises, what number is that? On page, did you say?
It's
page four?
item
that's J.
J on page 2 of 8 of the clean version.
J or L? Oh, 2 of 8, sorry.
J. I'm on J. I don't.
Yeah, and it comes up again.
So I would, then let us go there.
J on page 4 of 12 on the old, and J on page 2 of 8 on the new are the same. Okay, so what changes, the verbiage changes depending upon the different practice type.
Well, when we get to the mobile, you'll see it changed. It did not change on the fixed facility.
Right.
But I guess I do have a point, and I certainly don't want to in any way negate all of the great work that has been done with this, and I understand there's been a lot of input. But if you recall the statement that that Val made a few minutes ago, I believe that, and also that I think Diane made, there are practices in rural parts of the state that routinely use a local clinic's radiology equipment. For instance, a food animal veterinarian that does primarily food animal work doesn't routinely have an x-ray machine unless they're doing equine work. And so we used to routinely, if I had a calf that broke its leg, I'd send it to the small animal clinic in town. We didn't, so I don't think, I understand that, we're concerned about minimum practice standards, but I do think that we're not addressing the needs of every community, in California.
I would say that we are with Jay in that ability to provide does not mean it has to be in your facility.
So basically, ability to provide means or another commercial facility. Okay. Well, then why do you spell it out in the small animal mobile and not the large animal mobile? As I read through the whole thing, the only place it's spelled out is the small animal mobile facility.
That might have been an oversight on removing that extra verbiage. I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Look at it.
Go ahead.
Just from an enforcement standpoint, when it says shall have the ability to provide the diagnostic radiological services, to me, that means they shall be able to provide it. It's not saying that they can refer out. And so my concern is if the intent is that they can have the ability to refer, I think it should be put in here, the ability to refer.
I'm fine with
Which it was in the old verbiage through the words or through other commercial facilities. And I know that's not probably relevant in a large number of practices in California, but it is relevant to some.
That was my
I understand why
small
verbiage out, but is there any harm?
not small animal.
I'm just going to chime in on page 8 of 12.
Okay, got it.
Under
It's just a-
subdivision L, that language is appropriate. Shall have the ability to provide diagnostic radiologic services, comma, on the premises or through other commercial facilities. I think that's sufficient.
Okay.
That gets us there.
Everybody okay with that? Dr. Nunez?
Well, so I'll make a motion to add on the premises or through other commercial facilities
Okay.
to the clean version on both
Do we-
fixed and mobile practices.
So are we going to make a motion on each little change?
Well, I would make a motion on these.
Wait,
I
we've
would-
got a motion already. but-
Okay, well, I'm just trying to coach him,
Are we
which
gonna-
is impossible.
Well,
How about if
I'm
we-
friendly.
It's actually missing on all but the small animal mobile that refers to radiological services. Now, there's no reference in the vaccination group or anything, but in the large animal fixed, in the large animal mobile, and in the small animal fixed, the verbiage is missing.
Okay.
It's actually missing on all of them
Looks
on the
like
clean
it's missing
version.
on this small animal
It's
mobile, too.
it's not missing on the old version,
doesn't
but it's
say
missing on all of them in the clean version.
Then why don't we motion to...
Okay, let's just look at the minimum standards, small animal fixed facility. Are there any other changes you envision? If there are, let's incorporate them all into one motion.
Okay.
Do you see anything else?
So I want to be really clear about the changes that you're requesting or discussing right now. Page 4 of 12, subdivision J. Do you want the text added there?
Yes.
So it would
20
read,
2030.1J.
so on page 4 of 12, J, shall have the ability to provide diagnostic radiologic services, comma, insert on the premises or through other commercial facilities, period.
And I'm looking at 2 of 8, not 4 of 12.
Of 8, because 8 is the most.
The cleaned up version.
Yeah. So on the clean version, 2 of 8, 2030.1J.
Go to the clean version. We
Yeah,
have too
that's
many
what I-
versions.
Yeah.
Where's the clean version?
It's at the very, here's clean. This is clean. Keep going back, so it's 1 to 8 is clean.
And then the second place it should be at is on the clean version, page 4 of 8, 2030.2 L.
We'll do it globally.
Well, it's not in vaccine clinics, is it? No. And it's not in house calls?
I'm sorry, Mark, will you repeat that? What was, I didn't hear what you said.
Okay, so let's just look, are there any other changes in the small animal fixed? Are you okay with everything else? Because let's just make a motion on the small animal fixed. Yes.
I also have a question about 2030.1K. Shall have the ability to provide clinical pathology and histopathology diagnostic laboratory services. Again, many small practices routinely send out a lot of their diagnostic facilities. Are you making a differential between in-house or out-of-house here?
The ability has the same reference as the radiology. It means the ability, I mean, we send all ours out.
Well, but I would still have to say that you should add or to a separate commercial facility. I think it clarifies the ruling.
Okay. Again, we'll do that globally.
Okay.
Any other changes under small animal fixed? Dr. Nunez, you want to make a motion now?
I motion that we add the verbiage, I forgot what the verbiage was, to J and K, that will allow.
Or other commercial.
Yeah, for J and K.
Tara, do you want to define that anymore?
On the premises or through other commercial facilities
That's
is the
it.
wording. On the premises or through other commercial facilities.
Okay. Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion from the board? Any discussion from the public? Let's call for this vote.
Dr. Waterhouse?
Yes.
Dr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Ms. Buller?
Yes.
Ms. Laredo? Ms. Mancuso?
Aye.
Dr. Nolan?
Yes.
Dr. Nunez?
Yes.
Ms. Yanes?
Yes.
All right, motion carries.
Motion carries. Okay, we will break for lunch. We come back in 1 hour, and we will start discussing large animal fixed facility.
Okay, fine. I just want to make sure we fix that up.
Only 6B, and at this rate, we're going to be here till midnight. So if we could try and make concise remarks, if we could please raise your hand if you'd like to be called on. And Dr. Nunez should probably be on this conversation, but Tara tells me we do unfortunately need to go back to small animal fixed facility because we have a little problem.
Would you like us to start or would you like us to wait?
Do you go to the restroom? Okay, why don't you go ahead and start?
Concern has been raised by DCA Legislative Office that the revisions we just made to the proposed 2030.1 minimum standard small animal fixed facility. I am on page 2 of 8. This is the clean version. The concern is that the language we just added, which is on the premises or through other commercial facilities, is too limiting and potentially would not allow veterinarians to get the radiological services from non-commercial entities, which may include UC Davis. So what we have is that language.
Are there any non-commercial laboratories?
Well, we have a fix. So I just want to note that that language came directly from existing law, which is Section 2030, subdivision F4. So we just took that straight from 2030 F4. But if you look at 2030 F5, as Grant Miller was so gracious in pointing out, there's a better provision to resolve this concern, which is either on the premises or through outside services. That way, it's not limited to commercial facilities. So the proposal at this point, we would need a motion to revise 2030.1 small animal fixed facility to replace on the premises or through other commercial facilities with either on the premises or through outside services. That revision is proposed in subdivisions J and K.
So moved.
Yeah, I second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion of the board? Any comments from the public? Should we call for the vote?
Dr. Waterhouse?
Yes.
Dr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Ms. Bowler?
Yes.
Ms. Laredo? Ms. Mancuso?
Aye.
Dr. Nolan?
Yes.
Dr. Nunez?
Yes.
Ms. Yanis?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Motion carries, thank you.
They do roll call for someone? No, if they say.
I want to come back.
Don't get mad.
Now, in the edit version, we go on to large animal fixed facility.
This is the one we couldn't find in
Which I think got left out of the clean version.
Yeah, we didn't get.
But anyway, looking at the edited version,
Do we have it on the screen? No.
large animal.
fixed.
Yeah, because we didn't make it into the clean version.
Page, start on page 5 of 12. Large animal fixed.
Dr. Nolan?
I'm on page 6 of 12 in the large animal fixed facility. Are you with me? And I would like to talk about item G, which says, shall have an examination room separate from other areas of the facility and of sufficient size to accommodate the doctor, assistant, patient, and client. Occasionally, the exam room has to serve as a treatment area as well. I think that wording is confusing to the practitioner, and I think confusing to regulate, and I would like you to strike the word, I would like to make a motion to strike the words separate from other areas of the facility, so that it would read just shall have an examination room of sufficient size to accommodate the doctor, assistant, patient, and client.
What item is
Sullivan?
that again?
G.
G.
Second line, top of page 6.
Okay.
You okay with that?
I don't have a problem with that.
Any other comments?
What was the change?
To remove.
So we're, on G, we're moving separate from other areas of the facility.
And the word "and," you'll have to remove that as well.
Right. Examination of sufficient size.
Yeah. Any other comments? Any comments from the public?
Well,
Okay, Dr. Nolan.
sorry, but I would also point out that in number I and number K, I think we should add the same verbiage that Tara, our legal counsel, read for.
We're going to do that globally.
Okay, good. I didn't know that was the motion.
Okay, so to clarify, that revision is to J and K.
J and K.
To add the phrase, either on the premises or through outside services.
Can you read how G is reading now?
Yes, shall have an examination room of sufficient size to accommodate the doctor, assistant, patient, and client.
Okay.
And unfortunately, there are two I's, or is that a J?
It's a J.
Okay.
Just to look at it, yeah.
My eyes, okay.
Any other comments? Okay, now are there any other comments from the public? Do we have a motion to accept this version of large animal fixed facility?
I'm sorry.
Okay, Dr. Nolan,
I
just
saw
give
my-
us all your
I
changes.
saw my question mark very late in the game. Again, I have a question. We're on the same page, 6 of 12, Q. It says sanitary methods for the disposal of deceased animals shall be provided. In this current day and age, that's becoming very difficult to do in the large animal world.
It has to be done somehow.
And oftentimes, we have the clients remove their animal, and we give them the ability to take it to the landfill or wherever. It's becoming hard to get anyone to pick them up from our facility, from a facility. So it's a bit of an issue. I don't know how to address it, to be honest with you, and there's an issue with how we euthanize large animals as well, and what drugs we use, and how we dispose of the carcass afterwards.
Well, this doesn't say how you do it.
No.
It says that it must be done in a sanitary method.
So would you anticipate that this would allow you sanitarily to tell the owner to remove the carcass?
Sure.
Okay.
I disagree. I think that shall be provided means that the facility itself has to provide it. I think we can restructure this to instead read, deceased animals shall be disposed of in a sanitary method.
And that has a different meaning?
It does.
Okay.
It's not directed solely at the facility. It just means that the veterinarian has to make sure that the deceased animal is disposed of in a sanitary method, which could include the client providing transport.
I motion that we,
Read that again, please. The disposal of deceased animals shall be provided in a sanitary manner. Is that what you said?
That works. I think I had said it was deceased animals shall be disposed of through sanitary methods.
Yeah, and not the provided part. Deceased animals shall be disposed of by sanitary methods. I motion that as a change to Q.
Okay, so I was hoping to make a motion that would, for all of large animal fixed facility, just one motion. Anything other changes, Dr. Nolan?
No.
Any other board comments? Any other comments from the public? Okay, Dr. Nolan, would you like to make a motion?
Yes, I would like to motion that we correct the wording in item G to remove the words separate from other areas of the facility and. I would like to also make a motion that item Q will read, deceased animals shall be disposed of by sanitary methods.
And J and K.
Oh, and I thought, in J and K, I thought we did that in one blanket.
And J and K are amended as above or something like that?
And J and K amended as we did with the small animal fixed facility.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion second. Any other discussion of the board? Any discussion from the public? Let's call for the vote.
Dr. Waterhouse?
Yes.
Dr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Ms. Buller?
Yes.
Ms. Laredo? Ms. Mancuso?
Aye.
Dr. Nolan?
Yes.
Dr. Nunez?
Yes.
Ms. Yanis?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Motion carries, thank you. Okay, moving on to minimum standards small animal mobile facility. Any points of discussion from the board? Kathy?
Yes, sorry, I'm going, on L, which is shall have the ability to provide diagnostic and radiological services. services. It says other commercial facilities. Do we need to change that to reflect what Tara was saying, or outside facilities or whatever?
It's L&M, right? L&M.
NM, yes, pathologist.
I would recommend that change, and it would read L to strike on the premises or through other commercial facilities, to add either on the premises or through outside services. And then M would just add at the end of that sentence, either on the premises or through outside services.
Okay, any other comments? Any comments from the public? We have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion is second. No other comments? Okay, call for the vote.
Dr. Waterhouse?
Yes.
Dr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Ms. Bowler?
Yes.
Ms. Laredo? Ms. Mancuso?
Aye.
Dr. Nolan?
Yes.
Dr. Nunez?
Yes.
Ms. Yanis?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Motion carries, thank you. Moving on to minimum standards, animal vaccination practice.
This is going to take a little discussion. Because there's a fine line between this and mobile. So, and our staff, Dr. Parvin and Dr. Howard, both had some questions here that were good questions that I thought should be brought up to the board for a discussion, so that we get a clarification of what they are thinking of and what the meaning is. Before we go there, I would like to suggest that we make a change in the last sentence in item C. And correct me, Tara, on this if I've got it wrong. It would start with notwithstanding section 2030.1.
32.1.
2032.1. The veterinarian is responsible for documenting that the patient appears healthy enough to receive vaccinations or prevented parasiticides, as well as providing consultation, referral of clients when disease is detected or suspected. So the essence of that is that we're saying that this is an exemption from the standard VCPR.
With the intention that what follows in this sentence would replace the VCPR to require
See that? Item C.
documentation, which would require an inspection that the patient appears healthy enough to receive vaccines or preventable parasiticides. But also providing the consultation or referral when disease is detected or suspected. So that this would be, in effect, the new examination requirement in this circumstance only.
The reason that we develop it in this fashion is many of these vaccine clinics do additional procedures and tests. And so we wanted to make it clear that the qualification for a vaccine practice is at this level and this level only. If they're testing for feline leukemia or heartworm or anything more diagnostic or prescribing prescription drugs, then it would bump up to a small animal mobile clinic and the standards that are there.
Okay.
So why don't we go with the staff's questions, and I'll address them.
So one of the questions that Dr. Howard had was for subsection A, where it starts with location where the scope of veterinary practice is limited. His comment was the original intent of the vaccine clinic is unclear. Will it allow a veterinarian on site to supervise or be directly involved with each patient? Also, parasite control could include heartworm and prophylaxis and other prescription drugs such as oral flea control medications.
My response was the idea of, the idea that we're trying to accomplish is to provide a vaccine clinic similar to a human vaccine clinic with some supervision, since our patients cannot answer a questionnaire. We want a physical presence to see that the patient has an overall appearance of being healthy, no obvious overt signs of illness. We also want a veterinarian present if there is a question if the patient is healthy enough for a vaccination. And we want a veterinarian there if there is an immediate adverse reaction, and there needs to be a list of veterinary care if there is a latent reaction. Heartworm medication and some of the flea medications require a VCPR and classified as dangerous drugs. Any vaccination clinics that are doing diagnostics and dispensing prescription drugs would have to comply with the next level up, which would be a small animal mobile facility or a small animal house call practice, and would not qualify as a vaccine clinic. The only medications that a vaccine clinic could dispense would be OTC drugs like OTC parasite or flea products.
Does that answer your question? Oh, does that answer? Dr. Nunez?
Does this address record keeping? I see item N talks about records of all vaccinations and drugs administered to each patient. Is the minimum database for each patient needs to be, because I go back.
The vaccine records.
I go back to the veterinarian is responsible for documenting that each patient appears healthy enough. So does there have to be a documentation of a full and complete physical examination?
No, that's notwithstanding section 2032.1, which is the VCPR. Notwithstanding that, they still have to keep the records of the vaccinations for 3 years so the client can retrieve them.
What information do they have to have of the patient that actually received the vaccine, though?
The vaccination record or certificate.
I think they should document that they did a visual exam and the patient appeared normal. Would they say that?
I'm just a little bit confused about what information on the patient. Do you just have to have the name of the owner, the sex, the breed,
Yes,
all
color.
that stuff, temperature?
No. Again, we're modeling this after human vaccine clinics. This is a public health issue that we're trying to address.
Yeah, and you're saying that it is satisfied by saying notwithstanding. I'm confused about how that exempts your requirement to get all those information.
The only information that I see being required is what is necessary for a rabies vaccination or or information on a certificate that the core vaccines were given.
Because in a vaccine clinic, there's usually a blank form that the client fills out with their name and address, and the name of their pet, and the age of their pet, and the sex of their pet. And then there's like little boxes to check off which vaccines you gave.
Right.
That's all that's required.
That's what I envision.
And so how does that document that the patient appears healthy enough? How does that satisfy that line?
They need to have a box that says the patient appears. Upon visual examination, the dog or cat appears okay to vaccinate.
That is incumbent upon the veterinarian that's there. I don't see how that has to be written. If that's what you want, we can do that.
It is incumbent,
but
but
that
this
isn't what
says-
happens in a human.
But this
vaccine
says you have to document it somehow.
No, it doesn't.
The veterinarian is responsible for documenting
Okay.
that the patient appears healthy enough.
Yeah.
I'd also like to point out that as it stands, even with this revision, it would not exempt the vaccination clinic from 2032.3 record keeping, which really lays out what you're talking about, the name, the address, the treatment, the drug administered, all of that. And it's pretty lengthy. So I'm wondering if it's...
But I think that's what we want to have them. That
Right.
should be in there.
But I suspect we probably also need to do a notwithstanding 2032.3 so that they don't have to comply with the normal record keeping, but we provide a list of
Yeah.
specific information that must be documented, like the name and
Okay, so
the.
we should spell it out.
Yep.
I mean, I'm not disagreeing with what you're trying to accomplish, Dr. Sullivan, because I realize that a vaccine clinic is more like herd health than individual examination of each patient. But I'm just saying that there's a discrepancy in what you have written, because you have written in this form that you have to document that the patient appears healthy.
Yes,
Okay,
I see that.
okay.
So does
Dr.
that need to
Nolan.
be crossed out?
And this is a little out of my league, but I have a question for Dr. Sullivan. So if, for instance, they wanted to do an FELV test or to do a fecal flotation or some sort of test to determine whether the animal had a parasite load, that would be considered diagnostic, right?
Yes.
And so then pretty much the only big difference, in my opinion, is that the mobile clinic requires an examination room and.
And requires a
this-
VCPR.
I still think that with all the record keeping that we haven't circumvented, I'm having a hard, I'm like with Dr. Nunez, I'm having a hard time knowing where that line is.
Okay, so then I think what's being suggested is that we also include, notwithstanding, section 2032.3, and then, if you wish, delineate what needs to be in the record. Now, rabies vaccinations, we know what has to be in there. That's by regulation. So we could say then,
What would be J and K of 2030.3, right? Is that the ones you would?
J and K should stay.
But I mean, that's the ones we should refer to in our 2030.3, or what?
2032.3 is record keeping. So I think what you're asking to delineate,
Sorry, 2031 is record keeping. I thought you said 2030.3.
2032.3 is record keeping, records, content,
Yeah, there we go.
transfer.
Okay, sorry.
So can we,
Sorry, my bad. Okay.
can we say 1, 2, 3, and the treatment plan?
Well, you
I
know, one
would
of
say
the,
what
something
records that
pertinent.
satisfy a rabies vaccination that's required by the state.
I would think one of the questions would be history of any other vaccine reaction. Ought to be a question asked. I don't do vaccine clinics, but it seems like that would be a relevant question, a historical question.
We've done vaccine clinics for 40 years.
Okay, and you don't?
Public vaccine clinics for 40 years through either an association or privately.
Yeah.
And it's to get these animals vaccinated for rabies.
Okay.
Okay? And you stand and this line comes in of 150, 200 animals. You have your staff vaccinating and you oversee everything. That's what we're trying to accomplish here without being too onerous and look like we're impeding this process. So I think that we can add the requirements that you're asking. We can go right on a rabies vaccination, a rabies certificate, and delineate those items that are on there that are required by law. And then if you want a box to check off, appears healthy for a vaccination, we can add that. If that's the intent, I think we can do it without actually doing the word.
So this is only referring to vaccinating for rabies, or this is referring for other vaccinations as well?
Other vaccinations as well. Vaccinations and internal and external parasites that don't require testing or a prescription. Again, it's being done every day, and we're trying to legalize it.
Again, it's not my area of expertise, but.
Kathy, this is, how can, I mean, yeah, I know it's done every day, and it's a great asset. When we say that a veterinarian is responsible for documenting the patient appears healthy enough to receive vaccines, et cetera, could that, if the veterinarians don't necessarily take the temps of dogs as they're in line, right?
They don't.
However, I'm just wondering if this sentence, well, it says the patient appears healthy enough because you're not doing a full physical or taking a temperature, so it's just a general visual cue.
Just like when you go in to get a vaccine.
But I check off boxes that say, have you had the flu, or are you cold, have a cold, or whatever, on those forms that when you get vaccines at like Walgreens and stuff, there are boxes that the human checks off. You're not sick.
Last one that I had no boxes.
Oh, really? I did, but anyway, okay.
Okay, Dr. Nunez.
And I hate to confuse matters even more, but
Well, please don't. Please don't.
in order to obtain a rabies certificate, you certainly have to have a rabies vaccine administered by a veterinarian.
But that's true.
But vaccines are given in grooming facilities and boarding facilities all the time without any veterinarians present. So does this apply to all those places too?
I think the last.
And how do we have authority over them?
Is that a side issue?
I'm not sure that's legal. The last word that we got from Public Health Department was, as regards to shelters, is that a veterinarian who has signed that rabies certificate is the one that's responsible and can delegate that function to a staff person. And I think that was a communication with Anne Marie. I don't think we have it in writing, but it was a verbal communication. So
I think there's a general confusion about who can give vaccines and what vaccines and all that.
I agree, but can we focus on this?
We are focusing on it because if we're having a regulation for a vaccine clinic, I want to know what a vaccine clinic is. I mean, is it Petco?
Okay. So do we have comments from the public?
Do you want me to?
Grant, please come on.
Come on.
yes.
All right. So very quickly on the rabies vaccine, Reader's Digest version. It didn't come from the Department of Public Health. It came from you. It came from the Veterinary Medical Board, and it's written on your website. You guys have a legal opinion on your website that talks about rabies vaccine. It's under the frequently asked questions. It's under consumer. It's question number 4, who can administer rabies vaccinations. So that's all clear. Rabies vaccinations can only be sold by a wholesale distributor to a veterinarian, but the veterinarian can delegate the task to paraprofessional staff as they see fit. A veterinarian doesn't even need to sign a rabies certificate. A staff member can sign it on their behalf. It just verifies that the vaccine was given to that animal on that day. So the Department of Public Health doesn't care if it's a veterinarian who does it or if it's a staff member, and they don't even care who signs the certificate. That's all done. At the pet stores, at these grooming facilities, they're not giving rabies vaccinations. They're generally giving Bordetella. And I'll just stop there on that. Does that get you where you need to be?
It does. So it implies that vaccine clinics are probably done all over the place. So who exactly are these regulations going to be enforced to? Just vaccine clinics that are run by veterinarians?
Or private. If you have a company, there's a number of, I know of several companies in Southern California that are run by private people who hire veterinarians to staff them. Private companies. They have to get, they're going to have to have a premises permit to do this. And this is the criteria that they need to satisfy.
But there's still a veterinarian involved, so I think unlicensed activity is another topic, but I think that's what you're getting at.
But it's not unlicensed activity that, it'll sink in later.
Yeah.
Okay, so my understanding is the motion then, or the suggestion then, is that we add specific information on the certificate that complies with what the rabies certificate says, in addition to a check box that this animal appears to be healthy enough for vaccination. Is that what I'm hearing?
So what, I'm trying to remember what's on the rabies certificate that, so
Well,
there's
it's
a
the
lot,
name.
lot number.
I'm looking that up right now. It's,
I mean, it's similar to like a health certificate that you sign. It says the animal appears to be healthy and free of disease.
okay, so official vaccination certificates, and this is particular to rabies.
We fill
I'm
them out
looking
every
at 17, so it's California Code of Regulations, Title 17, Division 1, Chapter 4, Subchapter 1, Article 3, Section 2606.4. The official vaccination certificate must show the name, address, and telephone number of, and this is particular to dogs, so we would need to include any rabies sections directed at other animals, unless we just list this information in our regulation. I mean, initially I was trying to find the section so that we could refer to it, just do a cross-reference to all information required for rabies vaccinations, but because there are so many different sections and we've got limited time, we may just need to list these in this regulation. Here's the information. Name, address, and telephone number of the dog's owner. Description of the dog, including breed, color, age, and sex. Date of immunization, type of rabies vaccine administered, the name of the manufacturer, and the lot number of the vaccine used.
Okay,
And the expiration date was in there? Should be expiration date.
Not in this section.
So we
But
can't
we
restrict
could
it.
add that.
We can't restrict it to rabies because there are other vaccines given too. So I think that's the basic information that needs to be on there, and so I think we just include it. Okay?
And that includes the first 5 things that are in 2032.25, or 2032.3.
No, not 5.
Yeah, 2032.3 in here. So it's the first 5 things there. I think
I don't
that's
think we need 5.
the date you gave it.
No, it says date, beginning and ending of custody of the
The
animal.
date, well, the date you gave it. That's what it means is the date you gave it.
Okay.
Okay. And I guess, sorry, Ken, do we need to include expiration date?
If it's not required by law.
How long is that vaccine good for?
If it's not required, I don't think we should have it in there.
Okay. Ken?
Ken Pulaski with CVMA. If you're requiring the manufacturer and the lot number, that's going beyond what's required for other types of practice. So, I mean, how many small animal practitioners include the manufacturer and the lot number of their distemper or Bordetella vaccines in their records? But it's not, so you do, so good for you, but that's not a requirement. And so that's a more strict requirement.
It's required for rabies.
It's
For
required for
rabies, but
rabies.
you're talking about adding that for all vaccines.
Yeah.
So for rabies, that's fine, but for all the other vaccines, that's more than, so you're, my understanding is for a vaccine clinic is that we have some lesser restrictions than there are for other types of practice, and now you're putting a stricter regulation.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll address it. We'll figure it out.
Bonnie Lutz. I just have a quick comment and then a question. The comment regarding Petco is that every Petco store has a premises permit where they give vaccines, and they do have a medical record that they check off. They're actually doing more than this, so just for the record. My question is, though, because I get clients calling me and asking me all the time, where they want to have what they call walk-in clinics. So they're operating their regular daily clinic, but they allow walk-ins to come, and they call them tech appointments, and they let the walk-ins come in. I know, I know. I just want to clarify that this is not intended to cover them, because I tell them all the time that that is not legal, that If they're going to do a vaccine clinic, they need to like do it from 9 to 12 on Sunday and just do a vaccine clinic or whatever they want to do. But that just having the ability of people to walk in off the street and call that vaccine clinic where they just come in, don't get an exam, and just get the vaccine, I tell them that's not legal. I just want to make sure that that's not anticipated as being legal under this new regulation.
Dr. Nolan, and then we'll go back to that.
Well, she brings up a good question, and that is that if you're doing strictly a vaccination practice on Sunday at your practice, do you need a separate permit?
No, because this says at a location. So where the scope of veterinary medicine is practice is limited only to vaccinations. Yes.
Again, we discussed this, and my understanding and thinking of this is that if you're operating out of a fixed facility, that's your premises. You don't need an additional vaccine clinic. I don't think if you're operating it as a vaccine clinic in your parking lot or in your waiting room or whatever, I think this is the criteria you would have to fill. But if they're walking in, then it's falling under your other premises permit, and I think you need to do more.
Okay, thank you.
But
I think Tara should weigh in here.
So we initially started talking about whether or not if you were offering vaccine clinic at an already established permitted premises, whether or not you would follow this proposed regulation or fixed facility requirements. And the whole point became about how much documentation you need to have and how much examination. So I just want to make clear that if you're just offering the clinic, and I think location probably needs to be massaged a little bit to contemplate a location that is a permitted premises, but is offering low-cost vaccines for at certain times to accommodate low-income families. We would need to limit the application of this so that the vet at that location, which is also a permitted premises, doesn't have to do a full exam and do the full records. And in your scenario, when it's just a walk-in, we anticipate those walk-ins, that scenario would have to comply with this clinic regulation. So,
well, I guess my question is that I tell my clients, okay, if you want to have a vaccine clinic, then close on Sunday, and then, well, that's wrong? I mean,
that's not my opinion.
Well, under this, can't they just close on Sunday and just?
No, because they're at a location. If they're at a fixed premises, they can charge whatever they want to charge. The money isn't the issue here. My opinion is if they're coming in for a vaccination and it's at a regular fixed facility, they need a full exam.
and that's what I'm trying to get at. We need to massage location so that it's, the location has the ability to offer during certain hours at the premises where they're separately at the same time doing veterinary medical services. And it's just because they're doing vaccines in one room of the facility.
I mean, what my
So they wouldn't
clients
have
are
to
asking
close on Sunday just so that they, yeah.
But then what they also want to do, which I really do think is wrong, but I just wanted to confirm, that they want to be able to see patients in one room but allow walk-ins to come, and they call that a vaccine clinic. I tell them, no, that's not a vaccine clinic. You have a walk-in come in that needs a vaccine. It's a regular appointment. You've got to do a PE and all that. A vaccine clinic is something that's scheduled or, in a certain location. Now, I didn't realize that this then would not allow a regular veterinarian to close his practice on Sunday and say on Sundays from 9 to 12, we have a vaccination clinic. Now, I mean, I think that's a great service for them to offer. I don't know why they wouldn't fall under this, but I understand that if you're reading this word for word, they might not fall under that. But you would think that a vet would be able to do that if he wanted to.
I agree.
So it's either or. It's either you can offer the vaccine clinic at a location that you are not at the same time offering veterinary medical services at the same location, or we make sure that this could apply to a hospital where they have a room, a location that they offer, or they treat animals with vaccines only and can utilize the exemption under this regulation.
I'm not asking for that, because I'm really not saying that I think that's a good idea.
I
What
think
I'm
we need to
asking
be
for is-
clear.
Well, I'm asking for a client to be able to close on Sunday and have people come to his facility and fall under this on that Sunday.
Or do it in an
Or
evening that's
alternatively-
outside of, yeah.
Alternatively, does he go to a park? I mean, it seems to me like it's better, sorry, but I mean, it seems to me like it's better to close his facility on a Sunday and say from 9 to 12 or whatever, we're doing a vaccine clinic and falling under this, than to have to go to a public park to do it just to fall under this. I am not suggesting that they have one room where they see regular patients and another room where they run a vaccine clinic at the same time. I would tell them that they couldn't do that, just based on my experience.
I think it's best if they get a physical exam, and so I'm coming from the standpoint of what's best for the animal, and the best for the animal is to get an exam, whatever they charge for it. And they can do an exam at no charge if they want, and call it a vaccine clinic. But anyway, that's my opinion. Okay, Dr. Nolan.
I just had a question for Dr. Sullivan about the wording on J, where it states they shall have the appropriate drugs and equipment to provide immediate emergency care at a level commensurate with the specific veterinary medical services provided. Is that clarified somewhere else in the Practice Act as far as oxygen therapy, or is that just drugs, or what? Is there any guidance on that?
No, and it's not meant to be anything more than it is. So what the idea is if you're just giving vaccines, you have to be prepared for an emergency of a vaccine reaction. I don't think it's reasonable to say you have to have an emergency, because you have to be able to take care of an emergency of 2 dogs fighting.
Okay. So,
It's commensurate with the services provided.
Normally, do vaccine clinics have oxygen available? Do they normally have, what do they have available normally?
Epinephrine.
Just epinephrine or steroids or
Cortisone
something?
and epinephrine.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
I want to go back to the comment and kind of echo what Tara was saying as far as defining the location, and really understand the intent, because the example that Bonnie brought up, if you have a clinic to where you are providing full services over here, and then you have walk-ins and they have a room designated for just vaccines, it's a location to where they're just doing vaccines. And so if we receive a complaint and the respondent says, no, I have a location that's designated just for vaccines, why do I have to do a VCPR if this is where that's coming from? And I think right now it's not clear that that doesn't fit under it. And if you want it to be clear, we need to flesh that out more.
Well, we're getting really down into the nitty-gritty. So then I would say that location is probably not as important as the event itself, and I think our discussion at one point was the term event. And, I think that's how we address it. If the purpose of this practice is vaccine clinic only, then, and a veterinarian with a fixed facility wants to do that, then it has to be a vaccine event, period. So maybe we can use that type of verbiage to define it. There's a clinic right down the street from us, every Sunday had a vaccine clinic in their parking lot, once a month.
You don't like that?
I love it. I think it's perfectly fine. If the purpose is to vaccinate a large number of animals to protect them against rabies and other communicable diseases, just as it is in human public health, that's what we're trying to accomplish without making it costly and burdensome with records. So that's our goal.
So if that's the goal, then why limit it to a scheduled event, 4 hours on a Sunday? If the goal is really to achieve getting as many animals vaccinated, why does it have to be limited to an event?
Well, I thought that's what you were wanting. Because I don't agree, I don't think that having a room or a back room where, one person comes in every 2 or 3 days to get a vaccine, I don't think that should fall under vaccine clinic. A vaccine clinic should be an event where a large number of animals can get vaccinated efficiently and both time-wise, record-wise, and cost-wise, and that's the event. That's what it has been traditionally. So if, in trying to delineate this, if they're doing more than that, then it bumps it to a different category.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't think that, I don't think it's the same to have somebody come in off the street to get a vaccine, and that happens once every 2 or 3 days. I don't think that's a vaccine clinic. So I don't know how we define it better than that. I know that what we have been doing through the Southern California Veterinary Medical Association for the last now going on 50 years have been public vaccine clinics, and that's what we're trying to define here.
Tara, do you want?
Hi, can I speak up? This is Alana Yanis.
Yes, please.
I run these events I used to run them every quarter. Initially, when our program started 7 years ago, we do it every year now just because of finances. And it's exactly what Dr. Sullivan said. It's the herd mentality. We're trying to vaccinate low-income residents' pets so that we can try and reduce how many animals end up getting parvo. We have huge amounts of parvo in the communities that I service, which are low-income communities in East Los Angeles, where we don't even have vets. We have not one vet in the zip codes that I service. So the easier we can make this, and I'm particularly concerned about that one line where the veterinarian is responsible for documenting that the patient appears healthy enough. I mean, we have vets at our events, and they do a physical exam, but, they don't mark it that the animal's healthy. If they feel the animal is not healthy, they clearly say, we can't vaccinate your animal today, you need to go see a vet, here's the information to the vet we're utilizing today, yada, yada, yada. But, the more things we tap onto this in terms of requirements, I'm concerned these will become more expensive for nonprofits like the Humane Society, who I work for, or the ASPCA. These are the types of groups that are holding these events. And we vaccinate sometimes 500 animals in a day. I do them from 10 to 2 on a Saturday in a park. And, I just hope we can keep that in mind when we're passing these policies, because the more requirements we put in here, the more expensive these events become, and then the less animals get vaccinated. So, and I do agree that it is very different to have clients walking into a brick and mortar vet facility to get a vaccine versus coming to a park. A lot of our clients can't afford the $10 vaccine, so, they rely on our event every year to get their rabies vaccine. And that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Alana.
Yeah, I concur that. It's like, if the vet thinks the animal is too sick, they'll just pull them out of the line. It isn't going to happen. This isn't going to happen to your pet today. But it's just onerous to ask for documentation. I mean, it's all about high volume and getting through it.
Exactly.
But they still have to fill out a piece of paper. There's still a piece of paper.
What kind of document? Yeah.
Yes, we have, just as we had said, they have to fill out a rabies certificate. They had the name, address, phone number, the breed of the animal, the color of the animal, the age, the weight.
And they keep a copy of that.
Exactly. I keep a
Okay.
copy.
Yeah,
I keep a copy for 5 years, and we give an original copy to the client. And on there, we also have which, if they got, the distemper and parvo, or if they got the FELV, if it's a cat. So, it is quite detailed, but I think it's detailed enough, to add on there that the animal is healthy, it's just
But it can't be just a-
line and-
Why can't it just be a box that they check? Yes, I've visually
It
examined.
could be a box that we check, but, it's like,
That's
it's
all it
already
is.
pretty tight on that sheet. I don't know, it just feels like it's
onerous.
another level, another burden, and these events cost us, a lot of money to begin with. I just don't want to add any more load to what the veterinary, to vaccinate that many animals from 10 to 2, it's a lot of work, and we just pull the animals when they're not healthy enough. We just don't vaccinate them.
Okay, thanks, Alana. Okay, Dr. Nunez.
Just those vaccine clinics that you put on, Alana, there's always a veterinarian present?
Absolutely, absolutely. We have 2 to 3 vets on site when we do these events. We have Western students as well assisting as vet techs or Davis students if they want to come down, but, we always have vets that are doing this.
I have a motion after him.
Ken.
There would be a basic assumption that the pet was healthy enough to vaccinate by the fact that there is a certificate, because if the pet were not healthy, you would pull them and you would not fill out that certificate. So all you're going to do is put a checkbox that every single checkbox is going to be checked. Because if they're not healthy, they're not going to, I'm not going to check that. They're not going to have a form and a certificate.
We would
So-
certainly hope so,
So
yes.
that's kind of redundant.
Great point.
Okay. Okay,
Great
Dr.
point.
Sullivan.
I would suggest we remove the word documenting and put in evaluating.
There you
The veterinarian
go.
is responsible for evaluating that the patient appears healthy enough to receive a vaccination.
I agree with that.
Evaluating.
Well, do we want any record of the vaccination and the animal?
Yes.
Yes, so.
Yes.
Not more than what's already, with your rabies certificate, what you're already getting.
Right.
Oh,
Okay, so we can make that change to evaluating that the patient appears healthy enough to receive vaccines or preventable parasiticides, as well as preventing consultation. And then separately to nail down the VCPR and record requirements exemption, provide in the next subdivision, notwithstanding Section 2032.1, which is the VCPR requirement, and 2032.3, which is the records requirement, the veterinarian, actually, it would just read, a record of the vaccinated animal shall include all of the following. And then the list from 2032.3, which I believe you guys said it was the first 5 in that list, and also from 2606.4, the rabies vaccine, A through D, and then for rabies only require E and F, which is the manufacturer and
Okay.
the other one. So
this-
separate out what the
this-
veterinarian has to do, and then the record itself.
Okay.
The fact is, this has been going on for 50 years, and all of that information is on there, and to delineate it out, I don't think it's necessary, but it's being done. You have to do it. Otherwise, you don't have a receipt.
Well, technically, they're also violating the VCPR requirement, right?
Well, I know. What I'm saying is, I want to include 2032.1 and 3, but I'm not sure we need to delineate what needs to be on there and does, or,
Okay, so notwithstanding VCPR and record requirements, what?
I think at least that specifies
Anything
it.
needs to be
It lays it
documented?
out.
The point of having the notwithstanding
Right.
is to say, you don't have to do that, but this is what you do have to do. And now we're just changing, we're removing documenting to the veterinarian is responsible for evaluating. There's no document created. So that only goes to the VCPR at that point.
But in practicality, the client is getting a receipt that has all the information on it that's needed. So If you want to delineate it out, what needs to be on there, that's fine. I just think
No,
it's
I'm saying that this would instead say notwithstanding 2032.1 VCPR, the veterinarian is responsible for evaluating and then continue on. And then the next one would be,
notwithstanding.
no,
Oh.
because there is no new record requirement.
Okay.
If you don't list it, there's no new record requirement. So it would just be the requirements of 2032.3 shall not apply.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay.
Hi, Tara. If the board is still approachable, I'm Dr. Jim Howard. I'm an inspector with the California Veterinary Medical Board, and I serve at your pleasure. Thank you very much. I appreciate staff's efforts to bring to your attention the concerns that the inspection group may be having with this vaccine clinic item. When we open the Practice Act, it always becomes a very messy thing because things get changed sometimes for the worse instead of sometimes for the better. In the attempt to clarify things, we often muddle it up worse. So, and I apologize for not getting into the foray at an earlier point in the discussion. As inspectors, we get this every single day. And at this point, we enforce basically what's written in the book to the best of our abilities and the best of our guidance. To Dr. Sullivan's comments, what did the original framers mean when they developed the criteria for vaccine clinics? Was the idea there to basically move a large number of animals through for public health with minimal amount of veterinarian intervention? The way classic vaccine clinics work today in the state of California, you will have a veterinarian on site. That veterinarian may or may not see each individual animal that enters the vaccine clinic. There may be 3 or 4 different rooms of animals being vaccinated. One might be a cat room, one could be a dog room. You might have another area where some aggressive animals are being brought into. And all of the vaccines are being administered by paraprofessional staff. The veterinarian may be tending to other duties at the animal shelter, may have other things going on. They're generally at the premise. It's all being done under indirect supervision. So, with that in mind, can the veterinarian document that these animals are healthy for vaccinations? I would venture to tell you that the answer to that is no, that they cannot document that. And if you're asking them to put their license on the line and document the fact that they have examined each of these animals, it's going to be a real game changer for the vaccine clinics as we know them today. The other thing to come into mind and to think about is as we say, the tech appointments. Now we have a fixed premise of some type. Maybe it's a high-volume spay-neuter facility. If they're entering into the realm of doing things like heartworm testing, prescribing dangerous drugs, granted, yes, they have to, by all means, document a valid veterinarian client-patient relationship with a full physical exam and all things you would normally expect. However, if that individual walks in and says, I just want a rabies vaccine, can I get a tech appointment? Can we actually expect a fixed brick and mortar practice? Can we expect them to have the same standard as a vaccine clinic, a lower standard, or a higher standard, or should they be held to equal standards just because of the fact that they have bricks and mortar around their facility as opposed to a traveling vaccine clinic? Does it have to be different just because they have a fixed facility there? And I would argue on that the answer would be that the standards would be equal as long as what the context of what they're doing is just receiving a vaccine by a paraprofessional staff without the veterinarian examining the animal. If anybody has a question, I'll be happy to. Otherwise, I'll let you continue the battle.
Thank you.
So I have a question. Do we need the veterinarian to evaluate each animal? Because I think that's part of the holdup.
I think it's impractical.
But it doesn't happen.
But it should happen, is the point. Okay,
Not
sorry.
really.
Okay, Dr. Sullivan.
The intent was that there would be supervision of every animal, and if that's not being done, I think it's below the standard. we have to have some kind of standard, and the clinics that I've worked at, that was the situation, and we vaccinated an awful lot of animals.
And if that truly is the case, I just think it's so important to get it into the regulation that this is what we expect. We want to see documentation and define what that documentation will be, so there's no confusion amongst the veterinarians, and then when it comes to enforcement, how we're going to deal with it at that point.
So you said supervision.
Right.
So is it possible to instead say the animal shall be evaluated by the veterinarian or pursuant to written orders of the supervising veterinarian?
I just want to say, I have my hand up. Am I called on now?
I didn't call it you. Okay, Judy.
Okay, good.
Quick.
Okay, so to his point, everything he said was 100% correct, as I know all this stuff, right? And like Alana, seeing it from the other side. And if there's 400 dogs and a vet is on the site, or 3 vets, they may not see each and every animal. If what he's saying is, if you attach that vet's license now to that one animal and something goes wrong with that animal when it leaves, and it is nothing to do with what took place at the vet, now all of a sudden, are you really subjecting your license to what happened to that animal? And the answer should be no, you shouldn't have to, right? Because it's not the same as coming in for a physical exam and having the VCPR. It's apples and oranges.
Dr. Nunez. Oh, I thought you had your hand up. Okay, Dr. Sullivan.
My head in my hand.
Okay.
The word I used was evaluating.
Yes.
Evaluating.
No, in your response, you were saying the intent was supervision of the animal. And so I'm saying, does it have to be the veterinarian directly seeing the animal, or can the veterinarian supervise through indirect means via written orders?
What is really happening?
I don't care what's really happening. I think the standard of practice should be that the person whose name is on that certificate is the one that is evaluating the health condition of that animal.
And I agree with that. I think that's an important thing.
And Judy.
And then there's no reason that a veterinarian can't visually examine each of these.
That continues into Judy's point that you're saying, should a veterinarian be responsible for this vaccine? But they already are, because their license number is being assigned to that certificate.
Yes.
All right, that's fine.
And posted at the premises of the vaccine clinic.
That's true, okay.
Where are we?
Right.
So,
I mean, it sounds to me like perhaps you need to take maybe a straw poll of whether or not you want, there should be a strict requirement for veterinarian evaluation. Or could it be delegated via indirect supervision?
I move that it's the responsibility of the veterinarian whose license is displayed at the premises, at the vaccine clinic, and whose name is on the certificate, has the responsibility of evaluating each animal. I mean, just to give you a visual, you'll have a line of 200, 300, 400 animals in a row. And I don't care if they're going to 2 or 3 different rooms. As they come through, you can visually look at them and oversee that the vaccines are being drawn up correctly, oversee that the vaccines are cooled properly, oversee that the place is clean. I mean, that's all the responsibility that is going on there. But you can visually see those animals, and you can pick out a sick animal in no time, or one that's really aggressive. They usually come in with log chains. So, we're trying to define an entity that is going on every day and not make it laborious. I like the changes that we've come up with so far.
and I do as well. Any other comments from the, did we have a second?
Oh, that was a long motion.
That was a long motion. Yeah, can you restate that motion?
Sorry.
Know what it is?
The motion is, I move that the veterinarian whose license is displayed at the event and who is signing the certificates is the one responsible for evaluating the health of each animal.
I'll second that.
Any other comments? Dr. Nolan?
Would you be open, be open to saying not I really prefer your wordings appears healthy rather than evaluate the health of the animal. I think you need to be careful there. I think you should say evaluating that the patient appears healthy enough.
That's what it says. It says.
Okay, well, you just changed it in your motion,
Okay.
so.
What I said was the veterinarian is now the motion or the vote was what preference we go with. The actual wording is the veterinarian is responsible for evaluating that the patient appears healthy enough to receive vaccines.
Thank you.
And that comes with a caveat at the very beginning, notwithstanding Section 2032.1.
Right, okay. Any other comments from the board? Comments from the public?
Well, what he just said was a little different. The first time he said the name on the permit and the one signing the certificate. That's not necessarily always the same person. So the second one you said didn't include the name on the permit.
Or, so it would be or instead of and.
No, well.
So it's the person signing the certificate.
The veterinarian that's signing the certificate.
Yes. Initially you said, and the name on the permit.
No, I'm sorry. I meant there's signage that has to be posted at an event that has the license of the veterinarian. So I would go with the certificate then, because it's going to be the same person.
In that case it is, but you initially said the permit because you could have a premises permit by one person and they could have an associate who's actually doing a vaccine clinic.
I misspoke. I didn't mean premises permit.
Clarify.
Yeah.
If you're doing this, do it right.
Well, thank you, Ken.
If we have to.
Any other comments from the public? Okay, should we call for the vote?
All right. Dr. Waterhouse?
Yes.
Dr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Ms. Bowler?
Yes.
Ms. Laredo? Ms. Mancuso?
Yes.
Dr. Noland?
Yes.
Dr. Nunez?
Yes.
Ms. Yanis?
Yes.
Motion passes. Dr. Sullivan?
I think maybe staff and I could better define location with the idea of it being a vaccine event, but work that out. I mean, I think we understand what we have to do.
So this will be brought back to us at the next meeting?
No, I think we can just do it.
I think that's going to be substantive that the board is going to have to approve. I mean, I have an idea of where to go with it. So I'm looking at 2030.3, page 10, the beginning paragraph. For purposes of these regulations, an animal vaccination practice shall mean this. I'm stuck on location, but we'll leave it in for a minute. Location where the scope of veterinary practice is provided to the public during a scheduled vaccination event and limited to only vaccines, et cetera. That way we're getting at the event, not just the location.
Okay.
So it's location and scheduled event.
Can't we move that idea forward?
Sure.
That's.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I think that's.
Can we hear it again, Tara?
Yeah.
Back again.
For purposes of these regulations, an animal vaccination practice shall mean a location where the scope of veterinary practice is provided to the public during a scheduled vaccination event and limited to only vaccinations, and then it continues with the existing language.
So
Okay, Dr. Sullivan moves.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second
I'll
it.
second it.
Any other discussion from the board?
So who seconded? Was that Noland?
I did, Alana.
Alana.
Any discussion from the public?
Grant Miller, CVMA. Thank you, Tara, for finally putting a stake in the sand on whether or not this is actually an event or a location, because we went around in circles with this in our attempt at working on this. If that is to be the pleasure of the board, you may want to consider also in 2030.3C, a veterinarian must remain on site throughout the duration of a vaccination, and then we can never get the word right. It would be event, if that is what we are truly talking about.
Vaccination event.
That would provide a lot of clarification and really help veterinarians to determine how to get their arms around this. It also may help resolve the issue of the idea of one room in the practice just being designated a vaccine room. As Ms. Lutz had mentioned, that really doesn't work very well. You know, it's just people coming in for an appointment in a regular practice. So if it is an event, changing the introduction and that section C would really help to clarify that and make it more intuitive for people trying to interpret the regulation. Thank you.
My question would be then, instead of changing the use of the terms in C to vaccination event, it might be better to maintain the terminology that we're defining in the initial paragraph, which is animal vaccination practice. Continue the use of that term into C so that it instead says throughout the duration of the animal vaccination practice. So we'd just be adding animal, so that we're being consistent with the use of that term, which would now include a scheduled vaccination event.
Would you read your first sentence again?
Yeah. This is the definition. For purposes of these regulations, an animal vaccination practice shall mean a location where the scope of veterinary practice is provided to the public during a scheduled vaccination event and limited to only vaccinations and preventative procedures for parasite control.
I'm going to make a comment about that. I think that's a great, I think that's great. It's just that it's hard to, and this is mincing words a little bit, but I think it's hard to say, to read a sentence saying animal vaccination practice is a location.
I agree.
So I think you should say event.
Well,
it's an event. Like, can't you just say event there?
no. The point is that this was clinic, then we changed it to practice. It includes location, and then it's including minimum standards for a typical facility, not the practice of veterinary medicine, in this case, vaccinations. So I think we need to be consistent with what this is. It's aimed at kind of both. It's, I think, aimed at the surroundings where the vaccinations are occurring, but we're also tacking on what the practice looks like.
Or just use the word event all the way through. Yeah,
That's what
vaccination event.
I have a small suggestion, because I know Tara can do this, but maybe if she could have, if you could.
Can you talk to the mic, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe if she can go back, like, in 20 minutes from now, after having time to think about it, I'm sure she can fashion something that'll be fine, rather than taking your time right now to mince the figuring it out and go on to something else. I don't know, I know you can do it.
Do you guys,
It's just hard right now when you're in front of everybody.
do you want this to read practice, clinic, event?
I think it is an event. I think it is an
I
event.
think it's a location and event.
Yeah.
Okay, so,
There's
but
people shaking their
what
heads
is
in
the
the
defined
audience.
term, though? Because that's what we need to
Okay.
figure out, because that's part of the title of this.
We have one board
A
member who
location
needs to
event.
take a break, so maybe we should
Yeah.
just take
Yeah,
a break
the
right
break.
now.
Yeah.
We'll come back at 2:30, and maybe Tara will have a miracle answer for us.
Tara's like,
Now I don't,
I was like, where's Tara?
now I don't feel so bad that our task force spent a whole half day doing the same thing.
Yes.
Lions helping too. Clinic sounds like a one-off. Gordon's cooking over there.
You guys need to figure this out. It's a board decision. I don't know where you want to go.
Is that a location?